up
Yeah, I
there in the
appreciate
waiting
that.
room.
I'm not sure. Try to get them on. Thanks for asking.
Okay, sure.
We're good. Okay, the Queen Anne's County Planning Commission has come to order on Thursday, May 13th, 2021. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any public comments?
We have no virtual public comment.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone signed up in the room.
Okay, meeting minutes review,
Motion to approve.
second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Extension requests, there are none. Updates, legislation and legal matters?
Morning, I'll just stand.
Good morning.
Let's get to a microphone.
This is a good one. Okay, I just have a brief update on our text amendments, the citizen-sponsored text amendments, 2102 and 2103, which 2102 is the UC multifamily text amendment, and the other is the Nashville self-storage text amendment. Those public hearings will be held on the 22nd of June. The commissioners received your letters of recommendation and have proceeded with that scheduling. In addition, staff has been working on a reconciliation and protocol for the Kent Narrows Special Taxing District. That whole taxing district and the boundaries of that district hadn't really been reassessed in a while. There had been a lot of stops and starts to it. So staff worked closely with Gigi Windley, who's the executive director, and Victoria Hoffman, who's here today, to work on a protocol on how we can more smoothly communicate when there are changes in the district. If the property moves from a residential use to a commercial use, it becomes subject to that special tax. In addition, there was one property that had not been folded into that boundary of the district boundary, just through an oversight over the years. So staff has worked on a map amendment, which isn't a part of our zoning code. It's a part of its own, the Special Taxing District Code in the Queen Anne's County Code of Public Laws, but the commissioners have oversight over that district boundary. So we're working on finalizing a map amendment to extend the boundary to include this one property, which is owned by Lippincott Yacht LLC. And that map amendment will also be heard on the 22nd of June. Otherwise, the only other thing that I wanted to note is that I've been participating on a state sea level rise guidance manual work group. And what is happening is the state is looking at other model ordinances in other states. California, New Hampshire, and Washington State have models. And what Maryland is trying to do is to establish just a guidance manual to jurisdictions who are interested in taking their policy documents and codifying them in some way. So I've been participating in that work group, and we're buttoning it up. And I might actually step out of this meeting at 10 o'clock today and participate in the last session, which was scheduled in conflict with our meeting. So if you see me step out, that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Any miscellaneous staff items?
That was the miscellaneous item.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have major site plan 19-08-0034, Bluegrass Solar LLC. TM 11 parcels, 24 and 25 Sheriff Meredith Road, Chestertown, Maryland. TM 17 parcels, 4 and 24 Pinder Hill Road, Church Hill. proposing to conduct a utility solar project with an array and inverter area of approximately 266.04 acres within a 510.25 acre site boundary. The applicant is requesting a major site approval. David? You're David? I am. Okay, it said that you were presenting, I guess not.
Sorry, would you like me to introduce the project team?
Well, you have to, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Brendan Mullaney with McAllister, Detar, Showalter,
I'm
and
sorry,
Walker.
you're who?
Brendan Mullaney.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. With McAllister, Detar, Showalter, and Walker, 100 Northwest Street, Easton, Maryland. To my right is my colleague Ryan Showalter. We also have members of the project team, including Nick Leffner with Kimley Horn at the end of the table. He is with the project engineering team and can answer site design questions that you have. We also have members from Heelstone Renewable Energy, which is the owner and developer of Bluegrass Solar. We have Jennifer Kerrigan, who's general counsel for Heelstone, David Henderson, who you just referenced, who's the director of operations, and then appearing virtually, we should have Justin Gravitt, who is the president. We also have in the crowd Mark Cadell, who is with Norenco, who is the engineering, procurement, and construction company, who handles a lot of the back-end design and oversees construction of the project. They're essentially a solar general contractor. I know that staff's going to make a presentation, but
Sharon, do you want to hear from staff first, or do you want to?
Yes, but I wanted them to introduce themselves.
happy to step in when necessary.
Well, you introduced the project, they introduced themselves, so we'll move right along. For those who are unfamiliar with the project, I
I'm
believe...
sorry, Brennan, you need to introduce
Oh,
yourself.
sorry, Rob Gunter, Principal Planner, Department of Planning and Zoning. I believe 3 of you weren't here the last time this came through for concept plan approval, so this will be lengthy, but it'll give you an oversight of the entire project and the process. So utility solar projects in the county have a multi-step process. They submit concept plan that comes to you for concept plan approval and recommendation to the Board of Appeals. Then it gets conditional use approval from the Board of Appeals. And it comes back here for major site plan approval, which is the step we are currently in. And then should they gain approval for that, then they can proceed to permitting. So currently we're in step 4. You can see the project history. This has been here for a little while. A change of engineers, I think a little bit of COVID in there as well. So this project is located in the northwest portion of the county, just north of Church Hill. The arrays area itself will be on 3 parcels. Tax map 11, parcel 24, tax map 17, parcel 4, and that should say 1724 on the bottom. Tax map 1125 will not have any array or equipment. It will have a buried underground line that attaches the 2 areas. So the ag for the entire area is, the zoning for the entire area is agriculture. This property does lie within the utility scale solar array overlay district. In fact, you can see the blue dashed line. Those major trunk lines run right through a couple of the parcels. Utility solar cannot be placed on properties with conservation easements. So this shows that there are no easements on any of the 3 properties. There are multiple areas that are numbered by Maryland Historic Trust that have Queen Anne's County numbers. You can see all of those in teal letters. The important notes here is that the MHT has made 2 key findings. The 4 archaeological sites that are on the development area are not eligible for the historic register, and the project will have no effect on any properties that are eligible for the National Register. So now we get into a bit of the site plan. The blue dashed line again is the major trunk line The green square is the project and Delmarva Power substation area. Total parcels, including the one with the underground line, 788.9 acres. The site boundary or lease area is approximately 510 acres. Total limit of the disturbance is 454.4, and the actual array and inverter area encompasses 266 acres. They are well under their limits for impervious area, floor area, and building height. The applicant has submitted information stating that the maximum decibels for any noise will be under the limits of 60. Additionally, they've provided information regarding glare that indicates no glare potential, and the FAA has confirmed that no hazards to airborne traffic will exist. There will be minimal lighting for safety reasons at the substation area, but nowhere else in the site. The site is going to be surrounded by the required fence, 7 feet tall. It will be coated in black vinyl, no barbed wire. It will have entrance gate signage that name the project, a contact person, and a 24-hour number to call should somebody need assistance. So on the left, you have the panel details. So these are tracking panels. They follow the sun throughout the day. And as you can see, at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., the panels will be at their highest point, which is approximately 8.5 feet. Most of the day, they will be below that. On the right is the transformer, and that is about 9.5 feet tall. The project is required to address stormwater. DPW has reviewed this, and they will continue through the permitting process. They'll have to meet all the requirements of DPW as they've done. They're proposing swales, berms, culverts, drainage basin, and a whole lot of vegetation. So these sites have sensitive species project review areas, and the state and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services have determined that there are no threatened or endangered species. Now, this is an old clip out of the concept plan, but it shows the streams, stream buffers, tidal wetlands, and the wetland buffers. There is no disturbance to these environmental features proposed for the project. So this shows forest conservation. So the number 1 down there is existing forest, approximately 70 acres. Those areas will be retained and placed into long-term protection. Number 2 are the pink colored areas on the top right. There are several throughout the site. These are afforestation areas where the applicant is proposing an additional 9.3 acres of plantings. And then surrounding the facilities will be the buffer plantings, which is just shy of 31 acres. So that buffer surrounding the site is required to be 50 feet wide, and what you see here is a typical 300-foot section all the way around. On the right is a landscape detail of generalized tree types and the numbers they're proposing to plant and the sizes. And this project will plant more than 14,000 woody vegetated trees and shrubs.
Rob, I see the watering plan is somewhat internally inconsistent.
So they propose to water for a period of 5 years. With an irrigation system, they plan to put in concurrently with the plantings.
Read the, after the however.
Yes. Until the irrigation system's in, they'll water anything with the truck. That comes straight out of the watering plan. Let the applicant.
I don't understand that. That better be explained. Not now, but later, because that doesn't make sense to me. It's
Which is
supposed
why.
to be put in concurrently. It should be working when the plants are planted.
This is a clip of the landscape plan, and I included this one because it contains every type of vegetation that is proposed to be planted. So if you can see my cursor, this yellow area, this teal area here and here, and the green area under the panels is proposed for pollinator mix. throughout the site. I believe there's over 400 acres of pollinator habitat proposed. Around the edging, you can see the 50-foot buffer. These areas are orange, but they were pink on the other slide, are forest conservation planting areas. And this is an additional area of bare root seedling trees to be planted. I believe it totals 1.5 acres. So this project will meet or exceed the Department of Natural Resources pollinator-friendly solar designation. This is not provided by the applicant, but potentially this is what the site could look like, depending on the actual seed mix. So this is the access plan. This has not changed since the concept plan. They'll come in off of 301 Shine Smith Road and enter the site. They'll split right there. And these circles are entrance points to each individual array area. This is the estimate that comes out of the decommissioning plan. I'll ask Mr. Drummond to speak more to this, but you can see that the estimate here is $8.9 million. Salvage value is stated to be $8.2 million. So the overall estimate to remove this entire project is stated to be just shy of $700,000. The salvage value reduces the cost estimate by more than 90%. And Mr. Drummond is far more knowledgeable about that than me. So he did bring up a couple questions about that. So now these are pictures. Some of you have seen these. These are old. I did not retake them. So these are just locations, and the arrows are the direction in which the picture has been taken. As you can see, it's all open farm field currently. I suppose by now it's probably maybe been planted. Here are the power lines, the main trunk lines that run through the properties. And I believe that is the last. Yep. So with that, I can answer any questions or turn it over to the applicant.
Switch over to the PowerPoint.
What's up?
So again, I am Brendan Mullaney. I'm local counsel for the project. We've been overseeing the back end of site plan design. We went through Board of Appeals approval. As usual, Mr. Gunter did a phenomenal job of walking you all through being oriented with the site, what's proposed, the different components, and the project history. I think that it is important just to reiterate that the concept plan, what's before you today is a final site plan, and this is as close to construction level drawings as I have seen at the site plan level. I think that the county's done a good job of requiring a level of detail that gives you all a good idea of what's actually proposed and what will be constructed for the project, knowing that there are some negotiations that occur after your hopeful approval today, prior to building permit issuance. But what's before you is really a depiction of the construction plans for the project. You reviewed, or the Planning Commission reviewed the concept plan for Bluegrass Solar in 2019 and recommended approval to the Board of Appeals. Concurrent with the county approval process. A utility scale solar project like Bluegrass goes through a state approval process with the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission issued the what they call the CPCN, which is the order from the state that allows the project to be constructed, saying that it's been reviewed and found to meet state standards from a design, environmental impacts perspective, et cetera. So the project has the CPCN that was issued in 2019. The Board of Appeals hearing was also in 2019. As you all know, in 2020, we had delays for various reasons. Since the Board of Appeals approval, the project team has worked to, polish up the site plan, make sure that it meets the county standards. We've addressed three different stack comment sets. So I think that the site plan, I know that the site plan that's in front of you has addressed county comments. We will obviously continue to work with all various agencies in the county to ensure that comments are addressed prior to and following permit issuance. So walking through the, I already presented who's here, and Rob oriented you to the sections. The project is made up of three major arrays. The first is Section A, then we have Section B North and Section B South. Section B North and South are bisected by Pondtown Road. The project will be connected, Section A and Section B will be connected by an underground electric line that allows the electricity produced by Section A to get to the substation that will be owned and operated by Delmarva Power within Section B. So that line is shown in white, and it runs along Sheriff Meredith Road and then along Bowers Road to Section B.
I'm sorry, Brendan, before you go any further, that will
Sir.
be constructed through traditional trenching. It's not directionally bored, right? There's surface disturbance to lay that line, looks like along a right-of-way or something?
I believe that is open trenching. David, can you confirm that, please?
For the majority of it, I believe we do have two wetlands crossings in that collection path that will be a directional bore.
And any impacts to county roads, we've spoken to county roads, and they're aware of the project, and we'll continue to
Sure, just
to
want
work
to be
with
clear,
them.
each project's a little unique, and they address site restrictions or challenges differently sometimes, so thanks. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Absolutely. We went through the project overview. So this is the northern part of the project, Section A. It's along Ewingtown and Sheriff Meredith Road, and I just want to orient you again. Don't want to be duplicative of what Rob talked through, but the project, as required by the code, is surrounded by a 50-foot buffer that is made up of native species of deciduous and coniferous trees and shrubs to eventually provide a year-round native screen from adjacent properties and roadways. This 50-foot landscaping buffer surrounds the project surrounds Section A except for in the southwest corner where the project abuts existing forests on adjacent properties. What we've proposed in that area is an afforestation area that will be compliant with the county requirements for afforestation. Another critical component of the landscape buffers in the afforestation areas is that they will be placed in perpetual easement to comply with Forest Conservation Act requirements. So they have to remain in place perpetually pursuant to the easement, whereas in a lot of projects that we have permitted, the landscaping can be removed at the discretion of the property owner at the end of the project. It's important to note that these buffers will be encumbered by a perpetual Forest Conservation easement. This is the array that will connect to that electrical line that runs to the east along Sheriff Meredith Road. And you also note that there are 300-foot setbacks that are applicable to solar panels. The 300-foot setback was adopted to apply to utility scale solar, and panels have to be set back a minimum of 300 feet from adjacent residential lots. We've worked with staff to ensure that the project complies with that requirement. Section B North is the part of the project or the array where the substation that is owned and operated by Delmarva Power will be situated. We are concurrent with this approval or site plan that's in front of you today. We are going through a minor site plan application approval process for the substation. It is much like and less impactful than the substations that have been before the Planning Commission or approved by the county that are owned by Delmarva Power throughout the county. Adjacent to the project substation is, adjacent to the DPL substation is a small project substation that's required to safely and efficiently allow energy to be collected from the arrays and then placed into the Delmarva substation before it enters the major transmission lines that exist that run through the property. You will note, as Rob said, that there is a significant transmission line that is a DPL transmission that runs through both of the Section B arrays right through the middle of the project, and the DPL substation is immediately adjacent to that transmission to allow safe and efficient interconnection between the project and the existing grid. As Rob said, all natural resources, streams, and areas of import have been avoided by the project. There aren't any impacts to those. There are internal drive aisles that comply with fire marshal requirements. We've been in contact with the fire marshal's office and are working to ensure that all of their comments are adequately addressed, and that if ever necessary, fire and emergency equipment can safely navigate the site and has access to the site. This is the Section B southern array, south of Pondtown Road. Likewise, this will connect to the substation, and electricity will travel under Pondtown Road to Section B north. This part of the property has existing forests on it that will be retained as part of Forest Conservation Act compliance. That is approximately 70 acres, and you can see those two areas are hatched in cross hatching on the southeast and south sides of the project. Again, there are 300-foot setbacks that the project respects as necessary on this array. Certainly, a major focus of the county in adopting the utility scale solar regulations contemplated landscaping, and this project meets and exceeds all of the landscaping requirements of the code from a design perspective. These sheets are insets from the landscaping plan for the project, and they show that the 50-foot buffer surrounds Section A of the project. There's one access point off of Sheriff Meredith Road that the project will utilize. That will be a gated access, and inside of the landscaping buffer there will be a 7-foot vinyl fence that complies with the code that eventually will be screened by the buffer. The remainder of the project that's shown in yellow here and under the array will be planted in pollinator habitat. And at this point, I'd like to address Mr. Drummond's question regarding irrigation. The staff comments contemplate irrigation wells. There is an ag well on Section A, what is Section A today. That well will not serve the property. It is owned and operated by the property owner. And right now what's contemplated for that is that it will be rerouted to other property that is owned by the property owner to serve his agricultural operation, which will still occur on his remaining and adjacent lands. There are irrigation wells that appropriations permits have been issued by MDE. We've been working with MDE and with a well driller to refresh those permits and get them in place. So there are irrigation wells proposed on each of the arrays that will, their sole purpose, contemplated sole purpose, is to serve the irrigation system that will be installed in the 50-foot buffers. Installation of the irrigation is at the discretion of the landscaping contractor. From a practical perspective, timing of year certainly matters as far as the installation of landscaping, and it's preferred to have it installed in the fall or early spring from a survivability standpoint. If it is installed in heat in the summer, one option is to install sections of the landscape buffer and go behind it immediately with the irrigation. But the landscaping has to survive. It is bonded. There's a surety placed by the project owner, and to ensure that it survives for 5 years. And there's a planting and maintenance agreement in place between the project and the county as well. This landscape buffer has to survive, and it's in the project's interest and their obligation to ensure that it does, and the landscape contractor also has to ensure that it survives. So, there is not a formal requirement that it be installed concurrent with the landscape buffer, and it's right now what's contemplated is that the landscaping be installed on an array-by-array basis, and there may be a brief period between commencement of installation of the landscaping and operation of the irrigation wells when truck watering will be necessary.
Mr. Mulaney was very specific, he was very straightforward, he was very directive about everything until the last paragraph when it got really squishy.
So let me,
About when that irrigation is going to go in, and that is a major component. As I've repeated to the Planning Commission, as Mr. Showalter knows, this county is not in the business of chasing around sureties.
So let me address the practicality. You have to have the irrigation installed after the landscaping, so it's not broken when you're installing the landscaping. And so you can't, when you start at point A and go around the array to install a 50-foot wide buffer. The irrigation system gets fed from a well at one point and pressurized. So when you put in plants, if you have the drip irrigation installed, you drive over it, you break it, you cut it, and then you have leaks. When you start at the beginning and you start installing plants, you can't install and pressurize the irrigation because it's going in as it goes around the array. So the plan is to install plants and water and then follow the plant installation with the irrigation system as it's installed. Once it's completed and it can be pressurized, the irrigation system will be pressurized. So
It sounds like it can be done within 30 days after the plants are planted.
I don't know the exact timing. I mean, the intention is that it will be watered and will be watered until it's irrigated, and that the irrigation will come in after the plant installation is complete.
How long after the planting is complete will the irrigation system be pressurized?
I don't know that we have a specific date, Chris.
Well, that's where it starts getting squishy.
I'd like to address that. Please. Mark Cadell, Vice President of Norenco and the contractor for this project. It's in our vested interest to not have water trucks out there because they're going to be very expensive. So we would commit to that 30 days after the plantings.
That's all I'm asking for. We need to get the engineer up here, not the lawyers. Get an answer.
He's right here. He's not controlling when the pipe goes in there. Mark handles that.
So to address Mr. Drummond's comment, I would say that the project is comfortable as a condition of any approval today from the Planning Commission, saying that the wells will be operational within 30 days of installation of the landscape buffers. I would like to ask that that be on an array-by-array basis. One of the Board of Appeals conditions was that commencement of construction not occur on an array before the landscape buffers are installed. So the landscaping will be installed on an array-by-array basis so that construction activities can begin. We would ask that the condition be imposed on an array-by-array basis.
So it's clear that to your clients and the contractors and so on who are in the audience, why I'm being, one might say, abrasive about this issue, is that, as the Planning Commission knows, we in this county have had major problems with landscaping around the two utility-scale solar arrays that have been installed in the county. And we have been obliged to chase the operators around the country to require them to do what they said they were going to do. And that experience has been repeated in other counties. Dorchester, certainly, Kent, and the Planning Commission, the county commissioners are not interested further in paying me to chase single-purpose LLCs around the country to plant trees that they didn't plant or it didn't plant, or to replace trees that died because the promised irrigation never materialized. That's why I'm being, if you might say, abrasive about the subject.
What about the array-by-array basis? Is that acceptable?
I think that probably makes sense because they're going to be, in and out and tearing the place up, and that kind of makes some sense to me. The idea is that it be screened as soon as possible after the arrays are installed,
And more than 30 days.
and then they're irrigated within 30 days.
I would point out, just as a second, because I showed this to Chris a second, we all received this in our packets. And the section on irrigation, what Chris is asking for was not in here. And I think what he's asking for is what we need to do to protect the public interest, because this is silent. And so, asking for it seems to be a very reasonable thing on our part.
Understood. Thank you. Between Board of Appeals approval and today, there's been significant back and forth with DPW. I see that Mr. Porter from DPW, who's the reviewing engineer for the project for the county, is on the Zoom call. I hope that he would say and would agree with me to say that the project has worked with DPW to come up with a stormwater design that meets all of their goals and exceeds state standards. You will see on this slide and the following two, in blue, shown in blue, there are sediment basins. And one component of this project is that during construction, those sediment basins are required to catch any sediment or stormwater that may otherwise run off site. And the project has agreed to leave those sediment basins in place, which in the ordinary course of development, I would say is uncommon when they're not required for stormwater purposes. But one facet of this project is that those sediment basins will remain in place as an added precaution to ensure that there aren't any detrimental effects to downstream property owners. There are significant number of sediment basins around the Section A array. You can see them here on the Section B North and the northern part of the Section B South array. You'll also see on this slide that the landscape buffers surround the project. Section B North, there is an Afforestation and Forest Conservation Act compliance area on the east side of Section B North in the corner of the property. When this site plan was before you in 2019, or before the Planning Commission in 2019, there were panels proposed on the eastern side of the substation area. Those have been removed to further mitigate any adverse impacts that may occur to the view shed. There are some residential properties northeast of the Section B North array, and the project has pulled those panels voluntarily. The substation, as discussed, is on the east side of this transmission line, and one change. The Board of Appeals approved a conditional use approval for the solar array itself in the agricultural district. It also approved a conditional use for the substation, an electric substation use, and it granted 3 variances for the substation. One of those variances was a lot frontage variance, so that we could convey the substation parcel to Delmarva Power and have it set back away from the road as much as possible. Since that time, Delmarva Power would like to own the area of ingress and egress, the driveway coming into the substation. So the substation configuration, the parcel for the substation has changed so that there is a section of the property that is now part of the substation. That's reflected on the site plans that you have, but the driveway area will be owned by Delmarva Power as part of the substation.
Okay, hold on a second. Ray, can you please?
Trey, if you would like to unmute.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can.
All right. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you for listening to me, planning commission members.
Can you introduce
wanna
yourself? Ray, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Trey Porter. I'm the review engineer with DPW for the county. I would just want to also reiterate that what Mr. Mulvaney just said as far as the substantial amount of back and forth between this developer and the county as far as the DPW review of stormwater management and roads to some extent. Just want to give you a kind of a brief outline of what we've done. We have been to the site several times. We've flown the site with a drone. We've evaluated drainage areas that pass through the site that are far beyond the site. We've done significant environmental analysis. We've looked obviously at stormwater management when it comes to the runoff that's going to occur as a result of the solar panels. It's also important to note when it comes to solar development that row crop tends to run off significantly more than a solar panel would because you've got meadow growth underneath of the panel. So the premise behind the science is that even with the impervious area of the panel, because you have grass, essentially meadow underneath, meadow does not run off nearly as much as a row crop would. So that's something that we look at the calculations and we consider. Some of the considerations that we looked at on this particular project too, and to some degree other large commercial solar projects were, as indicated, the sediment basins that are required by a soil conservation district. One of the things that we looked at is just leaving them in. There's no, we didn't really see any advantage to taking them out after construction. We just decided, okay, well, on other project and this one, we just decided to require them to be left in place. And then at decommissioning, and if that's in 20 or whatever years from now, they can be removed at that time. That just adds one extra level of detention of water. But the calculations do demonstrate, even without the sediment basin, that there's a reduction in overall runoff from the site. And some of the things that we've evaluated were some areas where there's concentrated flow and there's some ag swales and stuff like that will remain. We looked into those and we looked to make sure that they were non-erosive. We also checked to, just to make sure that they weren't consolidating in an area that they had not gone before, so that we weren't making a problem somewhere else. We've met with homeowners, concerned homeowners that are downstream of the property. So there's been significant involvement back and forth, and I think we had a meeting of the minds about it a little over a year ago as far as how to proceed. The plans changed significantly, and DPW is happy with the results. We feel that the engineering consultant involved in the project did an excellent job of responding to our concerns, and just want to let you know that I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Porter, Madam Chair. Trey, good morning, thank you. For that, with respect to the environmental site design, and specifically noting Department of Natural Resources letter of downstream resources, rare, threatened, and endangered species specifically. Would you characterize these retention basins, numerous throughout, as meeting their recommendation for additional sedimentation protection?
I would, yes, they do accomplish that. The sedimentation is mostly an issue during construction, during the development. That's why they're technically called sediment basins or sediment traps. But in this particular case, since they're going to be there long term, they're going to be grassed over with turf. So they're going to provide additional benefit. And like you said, downstream there could be potential, there's a reduction in overall runoff, so that's important to state. But there any type of downstream erosion issues that are present now, they would only be benefited by the long-term use of these sediment basins. Yes.
Thank you.
Just continuing walking through the landscaping and moving to Section B South. On the northeast side of this array, you also have a forest conservation area shown in orange and additional sediment basins as discussed. On the southern part of Section B South, you have the existing forest retention areas. One is surrounded on three sides by the project, and the other is to the east of what's shown on your screen right now. There is an afforestation area proposed shown in orange on the southeast side of the project. Mr. Gunter already introduced the circulation and access plan, and I know I believe that was included in the materials that you received from the county. That's relatively straightforward and is a requirement of the code that the applicant submit that. And then these details are also depicted in the site plans that you have and what Mr. Gunter presented. These are rotating panels that will face east in the morning and will rotate slowly throughout the day to face west, and then will reset in the morning. And then a 7-foot vinyl coated, I believe black vinyl coated chain link fence surrounds the project. That detail is also shown. That's the end of my presentation. The project team is capable and willing to answer any questions that the Planning Commission has.
Have any questions?
I would certainly like to bring up the conversation that was started in our package and also through Mr. Gunther's presentation about the bonding, decommissioning fees, and the recycling aspect of and valuation, therefore, of the decommissioning process. I invite our counsel as well as the applicant to please clarify that. I think it's certainly something we have discussed in the past, and it obviously is of concern moving forward. So it has been brought to your attention. I don't think I'm blindsiding anyone by this. I'd certainly like to hear both parties, position on this and hopefully reach some sort of understanding. Counselor, would you like to go first, or you'd like to defer?
That's fine. The Public Service Commission in the last 2 or 3 years has been receiving decommissioning plans from successful CPCN applicants, inasmuch as the decommissioning plans are a specific condition, or I should say, submission of and approval by the Public Service Commission of a decommissioning plan is a specific condition of CPCN approval. In the last series of years, the decommissioning plans that have been presented to the Public Service Commission have advanced this so-called salvage value theory. And I can report to the Planning Commission that virtually every decommissioning plan that I've seen, which numbers probably certainly between 5 and 10 for CPCN or for utility scale solar projects in the counties in which I have an interest, all use the same outfit out of Phoenix, Arizona, to provide an estimate of the salvage value of the components of the utility scale solar project. It's an outfit called We Recycle Solar or something like that. I've tried to investigate this outfit in Phoenix, Arizona, that every one of these companies use. It has virtually no footprint that we can find in Phoenix, Arizona. It has a pretty nice website. To the extent that you can find it based upon its address, it looks like a strip shopping center from the Google Maps. So I am skeptical, to begin with, about the reliability of the information provided by this outfit in Phoenix, Arizona. Number two, it is fair to say that the Public Service Commission has acceded to the request for approval of decommissioning plans that propose financial security that is 10% or less of the estimated cost of the decommissioning, based upon this unverifiable, let's put it that way, salvage value estimate from this outfit in Phoenix, Arizona. The counties, including this county, have been sort of late to this game because these decommissioning plans tend not to be presented to the counties before they're presented to the Public Service Commission and approved. In one case, in I think it was Dorchester County, we were able to participate before the decommissioning plan was approved and make this very argument that I'm making now. That was unsuccessful. The Public Service Commission approved the decommissioning plan anyway and justifies its position not necessarily on the basis that it finds the salvage value estimates credible, but because a requirement of the CPCN approval is that the decommissioning plans be reviewed every 5 years. And therefore, essentially, the Public Service Commission said, in so many words, if we've made a mistake, we can fix it 5 years from now. The industry says that these salvage value estimates should be considered to be reliable, at least in the early years, because if you buy something for $10, it shouldn't be worth a whole lot less than $10 in the first 5 years. That's the argument. It's completely unverifiable because there is no market. And if there is a market for used solar stuff, the industry has not presented it, to my knowledge, to the Public Service Commission or any county. So I believe this to be largely hypothetical, and as best we can tell, not promoted by an outfit that seems to have much of a footprint. We don't know whether this outfit actually buys them, whether they broker the sale of used solar parts, whether they receive them and break them down and sell the component parts. If they do, it's hard to do that out of a strip mall in Phoenix, Arizona. Those are some of the bases for my skepticism about this entire salvage value theory. Next, the question becomes whether the counties have authority, independent of the Public Service Commission, to set decommissioning standards that are less than, equal to, or greater than what the Public Service Commission has approved. I'm aware that this is a debate that has not yet been resolved in a court because it hasn't been brought to the court's attention yet, nor has the Public Service Commission been asked to weigh in. It is my view and opinion that the counties do have authority in the context of site plan approval to do something other than what the Public Service Commission has approved. I'm aware that the lawyers for the solar industry do not agree with that proposition. And my guess is that eventually there's going to be a lawsuit over this in some county. Whether it's here or elsewhere, I don't know. It's unclear to me, other than raw dollars, why the solar industry is so resistant to putting up financial security that more closely resembles the cost of tearing these things down. So, that's the background.
Thank you.
Al, would you like to address that?
I would. I appreciate the opportunity. So a couple of different points. I will agree with Mr. Drummond that I think the solar industry is of the opinion that the Public Service Commission's preemption controls on this issue. That being said, we're not interested in having this project become the test case for that matter either. When you look at the decommissioning plan under the CPCN condition itself, the condition of the CPCN approval, and the terms of the decommissioning plan, it has to be updated every 5 years. The decommissioning plan has a schedule of values and a cost estimate for decommissioning.
Is that today's cost?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you know it right off the bat that it's going to be done 20 years from now. So why do we use today's cost?
Well, so this is valid for a 5-year period. Every 5 years, it has to be updated, and that's the point. Is it looking at a view for the next 5-year period? What is the cost of removal, and what are the values of the components? And Mr. Drummond's made his points about the value of the panels. There are a number of different components to this system, and
Let me ask a question first.
Sure.
What's the cost to put them in originally?
I'm sorry, Sharon, what did,
The cost of
construction costs for the project.
construction costs?
100 million?
Defer that to.
Yeah, this is Justin. I can speak to that. If y'all can hear me.
Okay, go ahead.
Justin, before you do
Yes.
that, can you just introduce yourself for us?
Sure. I'm Justin Gravatt, president of Fieldstone Energy,
Okay,
and have extensive experience financing these projects. $100 million is the approximate construction cost.
And what we're talking about here and the cost
the
of...
million is like 1%.
Yeah,
I mean-
It's the same, you're going to hear the same argument that we heard about landscaping a couple of years ago. Oh, we can't possibly finance these things if you make us do that landscaping. That's what we heard. Well,
Now look at it.
look what happened.
Right.
Now we're going to hear, oh, we can't possibly finance these things if you make us get a respectable bond for decommissioning.
Okay,
So the cost estimate that you have for decommissioning includes a number of different components. And salvage value, there's two components to salvage value. Mr. Drummond's argument all goes to the salvage value of the panels. A lot of this system is just raw metal. It's steel, it's copper. That has independent salvage value that I don't think the staff question. So all of the racking systems, the structural components, and the wiring has independent salvage value for which there's a great market. You know, we see people stealing it from irrigation systems, all over the Eastern Shore. And that, that's a couple $1 million worth of the salvage value that's reflected in this. So I think the debate or the argument is really just the staff skepticism about the salvage value of the panels. When you look at the cost estimate, what is provided in the salvage value figures is a figure that is 85% of the reported value of these panels. You know, it may very well be in 20 years panels are truly crushed, broken, recycled. Panels that are 4 years, 5 years old with a 25 or 30-year performance guarantee and lifespan, you know, have value and can be resold. And so this number isn't looking at what is the value of the glass, you know, or the other components of the panel. A panel that's got a 20 or 25-year lifespan remaining is something that can be resold. And what the salvage value figure assumes is 85% of We Recycle's market value for these panels. So if in the next 5 years this project is decommissioned, which is highly unlikely, the panels will be taken off and can be resold and utilized and have another 25 years of lifespan. We Recycle's provided a value as to what the resale value of those panels is, and we've discounted that by a further 15% in coming up with the $5.9 million value for the panels.
I have personal experience with some solar panels in my company and in my home. And in my home, we had to replace the panels because we were putting on a new roof after about 5 years. And the company came and removed them, and then instead of putting those same panels back up, they put a new generation in because they said that generation really is outdated. So won't you have the same thing here on the farm?
No, I think the difference is and I don't know the circumstances of your arrangement for your roof, but that company had a certain footprint. So they can generate power on your roof. And if they could replace those panels with much more efficient panels, they can generate more power off of your roof than they assumed in their initial.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
So if you're saying that the value of these, it still has another 20, 25 years if it gets decommissioned, where is your market for something that's already outdated? Because you're constantly moving along with technology.
Well, so that is reflected in the value, the resale value of those panels. You know, panel efficiency is increasing. And so let me go back to your house example for a second. The company that initially did that business deal had a certain footprint. If they had to put panels back on your house, they could resell the panels they took off for whatever their value is and replace those with more efficient panels and generate more power over that 20-year lease. They can make more money from your project. And that probably offsets the incremental cost of upgrading the panels. The panels they took off your roof still have value. You know, if they have a 25-year lifespan remaining, they may be less efficient than the most efficient panels available today, but they still generate power and could be used. So they made a business decision that the incremental cost of upgrading those panels would be better for them in the long run. But your panels didn't end up in the landfill, I would bet. I bet they were sold to someone else, and they can still generate power. The same is true here. You know, these panels, if they came off in a mass decommissioning, have a 25-year lifespan remaining in this first 5 years. And I think Mr. Drummond's points are much more valid when we get 15 or 20 years into the project. When you get to a point where they really don't have a long commercial operating lifespan remaining, and we have 10 or 15 years worth of development and innovation and increases in efficiency, they probably lose their value much more significantly. But this...
Ryan, respond to this. This is just a practical thing. We know what happens in the real world. For whatever reason, this project, or let's not even pick this project, a project, is shut down for whatever reason. Let's say within the first 10 years. And it needs to be removed. It's likely that it's, when I say for whatever reason, it's likely that it's being decommissioned because it has financial problems. It's lost its major customer or something. And now we've got an $8 million decommissioning project to be run by a company that's lost its major customer or has otherwise had financial difficulties. and and the county then has a $700,000 bond. We have, and again, we have this financially troubled LLC that's in Timbuktu somewhere. And they said, no problem, we'll decommission it, but we don't have the money. And we can't get the money until we sell these panels. But we don't have the money to take the panels out, to sell them, to get the money to take them out. I just see that as exactly what's going to happen when something catastrophic happens to one of the operators or owners of these facilities, and we're left with $700,000 to do an $8 million job.
So I think, Mr. Drummond, the difference between this and any other business is the operating cost is almost inconsequential. You know, if it's a coal-fired plant, you have to put fuel into it. You have to pay people to run it. You have to maintain it. You have to clean it. If it's a gas-fired plant, you have to buy gas. America has an insatiable demand for energy.
You don't have to convince me, you got to convince them.
we are moving towards renewable energy in an increasing manner, but there's not going to be a shortage of demand for electrical energy in our country. And the capital cost is sunk when this is built. Now, sure, there's some mowing cost, but the probability of there being some catastrophic operating or financial problem is almost non-existent in this case because the capital cost is sunk.
If that's the case, then why not just give us the larger bond?
Exactly.
I mean, that would be
Justin,
simple.
If I can please speak again.
Sure.
The example that the council just made, the example of the $700,000 in 10 years. Remember, this is a 5-year estimate, so this is $700,000 in this first 5 years. And if we're talking practicality, the practicality of a decommissioning event happening in its first 5 years is so remotely unlikely due to all the financial commitment that's gone into this project, all the financing parties that have a huge vested interest in making sure that this project operates and continues to operate well. We respect the need to have a decommissioning bond. We understand that if the very extreme remote scenario happens in the first 5 years that we need to decommission, we recognize that and respect the need to put a decommissioning bond up. But we're at least in the first 5 years, we're talking about a scenario that is so remotely unlikely to happen that this is a conversation that will be refreshed every 5 years as more information is gained and the market evolves and there's more experience with decommissioning these projects. But in the short term, if a project of this size gets decommissioned, there is going to be a market for these panels. They're only going to be 5 years old at the oldest time frame that we're talking about. There's going to be mountains of steel pulled out of the ground and sold to recyclers. I mean, we all are seeing commodity prices right now, and it's unrealistic to think that there's going to be no value for these raw materials that are being pulled out that are only 5 years old.
Why should
a scenario that's very unlikely to happen in the next 5 years. Why
should the risk be shifted to the county? You
claim
I
I don't think that.
You claim that.
I don't think there is a practical risk that we're talking about.
Okay,
I just don't think there's a practical risk.
Okay, fine. Prove it in the next 5 years, but in the meantime, put up a respectable amount of financial security.
It just seems unnecessary to waste that money. I'd rather see the money
No,
go
it's not a waste on our
somewhere else.
side. It's not a waste from where we sit. And we're not in the business of taking out $750,000 worth of steel and selling it. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure that the county's not stuck.
I
And
understand that.
if you set the parameters up front, rather than down the road 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, you've set the precedent.
And the practical reality of this is that we know from other areas of regulation where the state and the county are currently involved, which involves, for example, tidal and non-tidal wetlands violations, forest conservation, all those kinds of things. Almost inevitably, it's the local jurisdiction that has to do the enforcement because the state won't. And that's likely to happen here if there's some catastrophe.
So I,
Understand, just looking for practicality, just as you're describing.
Well, we're doing the same thing.
We see practical salvage value in this project.
I think what I would like to propose, because I know you have other items on your agenda, we've heard your comments, we've heard Mr. Drummond's position. What I'd like to see is an approval of the site plan with a condition that we continue to work with the staff on this issue, and if it has to come back to the Planning Commission, so be it. But I'd like to be able to move forward and spend time with Chris and Amy and work to address your concerns, hopefully to find a practical and balanced solution.
But you want us to give you approval to go to the next step, to permitting.
Subject to that condition, that we either have to have in place a decommissioning bond that the staff, are satisfied with, or we have to come back to you to resolve that requirement.
We may be satisfied with $700,000 if somebody would tell us about We Recycle LLC or whatever it's called out of Phoenix, Arizona, because it appears to me to be a chimera.
Well, I have a comment, question on that. Thank you for bringing it up, Mr. Drummond, in that, right, if I'm going to build a deck off my house, you're darn sure I'm going to get 3 estimates to feel comfortable installing that deck or whatever project it may be. And it's absolutely mind-blowing to hear council say that not only this project, but previous project under his purview picked the same single bidder, if you will, on this We Recycle solar. And it seems incredibly irresponsible and speculative to put all those eggs into that one basket when we're talking, financial scales that we're talking, right? Is there not an appetite or a desire for the applicant even to have some surety or some sense of fiscal responsibility to that number that comes before you? And why can't we get 3 bids? And you don't have to, right? You pick the most responsible bid, not just the single one that everybody seems to go to because they rubber stamp things. I don't know this company. I don't want to, tarnish their reputation necessarily, but that does not pass the smell test to me as a government entity that we review bids all the time, and it has to go out for public. It has to be a hearing. It has to be transparent, and this does not seem like it meets those minimum standards to me. And if so, in this proposal that you just made, I would like that to be part of the discussion, please. If we're going to move forward with the discussion, I'd like that.
I think that's a good suggestion. I think that's a fair.
There has to be somebody else out there that's chewing these things up or recycling them. There has to be. Or there has to be a reason why everybody goes to the strip mall in Phoenix if you follow the example.
I can't guarantee that it's.
Right, my point is
That's somewhat.
I'm oversimplifying to make the story
It's somewhat
contiguous.
somewhat figurative.
Yes, understood.
We understand the point. So we'll work to satisfy Mr. Drummond's curiosity.
Thank you, Mr. Showalter.
Are there other questions or concerns?
But I would ask the question, since, it seems that the cost of the bond up front being at, let's say, $10 million, that the stipulation is that the bond after 15 years goes from, let's say the salvage value is the salvage value in the early years, that the bond is increased to $5 or $10 million at the end of 15 years. You're well into the project. You're already, the company's making its money, but take a look at a bond being posted, increased at that point in time to a higher number, let's say $10 million, so that we're sure, so the county is sure that the decommissioning actually matches those numbers. Because, again, 15 years out, present value is X, it may actually be X minus 50%. And so why not give the county assurance? You don't have to take the bond out in the first 10 years. Take the bond out at 15 year, increase it, from $1 million to $10 million. So we have assurances that the decommissioning actually will occur. If the bond never gets called, your only cost is the cost of the bond.
Which is about 1% usually.
This plan, just so we're clear, this proposes only a 5-year value. And so under the state approval in this draft, we would do that in 5-year increments, not wait until year 10 or year 15.
I hear you.
Well, they've already bought into the Public Service Commission
Yeah.
decommissioning plans with proposed bonds
Yeah.
less than 10% of the estimated cost of the decommissioning. And 5 years from now,
Yeah.
I'm not optimistic that the Public Service Commission will be much more stringent. But
Exactly.
these solar projects and approval of them and construction of them are so politically hot and so politically promoted that state agencies, in my humble opinion, are afraid to say no. So it's kind of left to us to sometimes say no. Particularly when this county has been so accommodating, in my opinion, to large-scale solar projects.
What would cause this site to need to be decommissioned?
I think that was Justin's point. I mean,
And it's land leased, right? You don't own it.
the land is leased.
And for what period of time? I mean, why wouldn't this be basically perpetual?
So the lease,
Panels become degraded for whatever reason, they get upgraded, and, I mean, when you build a power generating plant, hydroelectric, fossil fuel, they last for 100 years.
so the lease the lease is not perpetual. It's not an indefinite ground lease. It's a lease for a term of years. It may very well be that we find in 10 or 15 years or 30 years, these panels are replaced with something that's more efficient and the lease term is extended. So it may continue. I think Justin's point was when you put $100 million in the ground on a system that relies on only input from the sun, which is free, and modest maintenance and mowing, there's virtually no reason why this will be decommissioned. But I understand the county has to address the hypothetical. I think the probability of a decommissioning event is extraordinarily low.
I don't necessarily, I agree with that. I think that's probably right. Can I ask another question, somewhat off topic? Well, it's off this particular topic, but it has to do with risk shifting. In a letter to Mike Wisnowski on April 19th of 2020, One Energy announced that it had sold this project, or sold Bluegrass LLC to Heelstone Development LLC, which One Energy is now required to do under state law. And it is Heelstone Development LLC that is before us today as presumably the sole member of Bluegrass Solar LLC. There's always some mystery about ownership of these single-purpose LLCs. Heelstone is described as a specialist in, quote, solar project development, finance, and asset management, and has developed and achieved commercial operation on more than 60 projects. Does Heelstone operate the projects once they're completed, or do they get flipped again?
Jennifer, do you want?
Because that has to do with risk shifting. Are we going to be chasing another LLC? Do we have to make sure that the financial security, the bond, is properly endorsed to a new owner, so on and so forth?
So Jennifer Kerrigan, General Counsel.
People, so we can understand what you're saying.
Jennifer Kerrigan, General Counsel with Heelstone. Our general practice is we build and operate the projects for a certain amount of years. And then we do look at the prospects of potentially selling the project to longtime owners. But my understanding is we would have to notify the staff, let you know about that, and all the securities that are in place would likewise remain in place for the duration of the project that are required.
What are approximate few years?
Usually about 2 or 3 years after operations. It's our general practice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns?
Back to the bond.
I like projects that have only one open issue. So again, to reiterate, my proposal would be that you grant site plan approval with a specific condition that requires the applicant to continue the dialogue and to work with the staff and to reach a resolution of the decommissioning plan that the staff is satisfied with. And if we're unable to do so, that we have to come back to you to allow you to resolve that question. And I think, just to narrow the issues, if you look at Section 3 of the decommissioning plan, the estimated cost is $8.1 million. It includes a 10% contingency, which increases that to $8.9 million. And I don't think we've heard any debate about the value of the raw metals, you know, the steel, the copper. That's $2 million. So of the salvage value estimate, we have $5.9 million associated with the panels. I think that's the area in which we still have discussion.
What are you talking about?
Ma'am, if you look at page 8 of the decommissioning
Yeah, I'm looking
plan.
at page 8, but I see the 8, 9.
So
Put it up
the
on the screen, Sharon.
Escape.
you have the PDF. Pull that up.
And
The bottom of page 8, the subtotal of demolition and removals is 8.9 million, 8.949. Below that, there are 3 line items for the salvage value. And so the PV modules, the photovoltaic modules, that's the solar panels that we're talking about.
That's not our concern. It's not the amount of money. It's that we are not in a position if we get stuck because we can't find that Arizona company. We get stuck. We are not in a position to take it down.
No, I understand. I think the only real
We want to make sure
issue.
we have enough money in our coffers to pay somebody to do it.
That's right. And so the only issue about whether you have enough money to do it, that Mr.
It's the
Drummond
amount of the
has.
bond.
And the value that we're debating is that
We can't do that. We can't take them out to sell them. We can't sell them until we take them out. And we can't take them out unless we have the money to take them out.
I
We're
understand.
back to that.
The only value, the only component of the bond amount that is at issue is the $6 million on that line item. The deduction, if you will, for the value of the panels. I think that's what we have to resolve.
We're not challenging the estimate of the value of the raw materials. I get that. I do have the chicken and egg. How do you sell the stuff until you take it out? To take it out, you have to have the money to take it out. So you really need the money and then sell it to reimburse yourself.
And so, I think a potential
We can put it in
compromise.
there that you can have the money that's left over after the job's done, make sure that it's done.
Well, I think one potential compromise is we look at providing additional estimates on the panel value to address
For example, there is a line item for removal of equipment foundation, $1,086,000.
That's where I was going, is
Right.
perhaps we help to substantiate the recycle or salvage value of the panels and also look to include the labor costs associated with removal of the
Something like
panels.
that, yeah.
I mean, I think there's a way that we can resolve this at a staff level to Mr. Drummond's satisfaction.
I'm not necessarily looking for a bond that's $8.9 million up front, because I understand these things are going to have some value. And the raw materials, there is market for those. I get that. But the risk should not be shifted to the county. And there is probably a balance of, where the risk is mitigated sufficiently. I don't know what that is, because I don't trust, so far, I don't want to besmirch this outfit in Phoenix, Arizona, any more than perhaps I already have. But I've asked for information on this recycle thing in Phoenix, and there's been dead silence on its true bona fides.
I don't believe it's been dead silence from this group, just so that's clear.
Well,
Maybe from the industry.
my skepticism is well known.
Understood.
And you haven't bothered to undo that skepticism by providing some information about this outfit in Phoenix. I haven't asked you to, but you might have thought about doing so.
Can I propose some conditional language, some draft language for this condition? Is something like the applicant is to work with staff to reach a mutual satisfactory resolution with regard to bond and surety issues for the decommissioning process, decommissioning/salvaging process.
Mitigation, reclamation.
Mitigation.
And if unable to do so, return to the Planning Commission for resolution.
Okay, well, we have to do that after we get approval. We haven't had approval yet.
Who on staff makes that decision?
Have to do our best.
Yeah, 'cause we're actually throwing that out there.
I mean, the project's a planning commission approval. I mean, if you want staff's opinion, I say it comes back here and they approve the bond.
Well,
I would agree.
That probably makes sense. Here's
I
what
would
we've
agree.
agreed, here's
Yeah.
the outlines of what we have tentatively agreed to.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, it should come back here.
Right, okay, I accept that. That makes good sense.
But we have other things to. There was another one on the irrigation system that must be installed and operational. Right.
Okay, I just wrote something down.
Plus we have the other 8.
Yeah, I just wrote down, another condition would be that the irrigation system be fully in place within 30 days of landscaping completion.
Installed and operational within 30 days.
Installed and operational within 30 days of landscaping completion on an array by array basis.
They're gonna landscape in stages, so it'll be irrigated in stages,
On an array by array basis.
section by section basis.
Let me just, why don't you ask Jenny that, sir? You ask her. Second condition is fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take you more than 30 days to get the final edits from DPW and all that stuff. And get building permits and so on, so.
But they can't get building permits until we get,
And
Give
get
'em
grading,
your
get all your grading permits lined up.
all right, are there any other questions from the commission?
I have it, I'm sorry, another one. Sorry?
You have another one?
Yeah, different subject. I was reminded of it when I mentioned a grading permit. Could we put up is there much topography out there?
Some topography, yeah.
Talk to us about how much, if any, grading is gonna be going on, and where's the topsoil going?
Can you handle that?
Yeah.
Question, go ahead.
And the reason I ask is because in one of the 2 solar projects that has been built in this county, we learned after the fact that the entire 76 acres was scraped off, the topsoil was scraped off.
Sure. Yeah, I think for specific to topsoil, I know one of the concerns is always topsoil not being hauled off site. So there's notes all over the plans, no topsoils to leave the project, so that it could be respread during the decommissioning of the project. I mainly always think of like the access roads. You're not going to put topsoil back in place. It may need to be just stockpiled on site.
You're just gonna stockpile it?
In most cases, it'll just be respread across other areas of the site. So if it's 8-9 inches of topsoil today, it might be 10.
Doesn't that cause runoff and problems?
No, it all gets stabilized just like it would, with any kind of seed mix. So when we put the meadow mixes down, it'll all get stabilized. And when you look at the course of the entire project, it's, less than 5% of the project, I'd say, is some kind of equipment pad or access road that'll require the topsoil to get pulled up. So it's fractions of an inch if you just respread it across the rest of the site. Otherwise, if it was a small just a small mound of dirt essentially along the roads that you would see similar to any county road that gets built if you have a borrower stockpile area. For stripping it, the topsoil does get stripped in some areas where there's minor grading that you need just to kind of keep the panels in line for structural needs. The topsoil gets stripped so that you can grade, and then it gets respread again so that dirt can get stabilized with the vegetation on top of topsoil. So hopefully there's no topsoil that'll get removed from the site. It'll either be respread or stockpiled so that it can be respread during decommissioning. Topsoil will be stripped in just limited areas where there's grading needing to be done, and then it gets respread across those areas. All of those steps are called out both on this plan as well as in the vegetative management plan. That's a condition of the CPCN approval.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, can I get a suggested resolution?
Comment?
Nope. Oh, public comment. I'm sorry. That's very important. So before public comment, let's take a 5-minute break.
Due to is
Yeah, no one's signed up for it. No one's. The only person that's in now that wasn't in earlier is Nancy Scazzari, but I'm not sure if she wants to make comment on anything or not.
All right, we're back in order. Ready?
Good.
Okay. Back in order. Public comment. Have any on Zoom?
Nancy, I saw that you joined late. If you would like to make public comment, if not, I believe everyone else was here for the other presentations.
Okay, no public comment. Can we get a suggested resolution?
It might be useful to have the representative of the
We could have blown right through that.
Sounds like everyone agrees to this.
Resolved everything.
Second. Right.
Guess we're on hold again.
Oh, they're scurrying back.
Good, they're good.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
That's okay. All right, let's get back on the record. Okay, may I have a suggested resolution? We already called for public comment. There was no public comment. Okay, suggested resolution?
I have actually, if you may, Madam Chair, may I have a question for council, possibly second, depending on the answer to the first. In that, Commissioner Baker and I were talking in the break about who ultimately would have the authority to adjust the bond if at 5, 10, whatever interval down the road, to see that that captures the concerns voiced today. Is that?
Well, number one, the Public Service Commission's approval of the decommissioning plan that includes the bond amount over which we've been debating is only good for 5 years. So they have to come back, or I should put it this way, whoever owns and operates the project at the time, it probably won't, that we've just heard, be this applicant, is obliged to return to the Public Service Commission and justify a continuation of the decommissioning plan and the financial security. And the Public Service Commission could then say, well, $700,000 is insufficient, we want it to be X. Similarly, any approval that is ultimately granted in the site plan context could also have a time limit, such that the applicant would have to come back both to the Public Service Commission and the county in intervals of time.
Not sure I understood. So the decommissioning plan, the terms of the decommissioning plan itself require that the estimates be updated on a 5-year increment. We have no problem coming back to the county for that. I just want to make sure it's clear that the site plan approval would be valid, subject to the condition that we have a decommissioning plan. If that plan requires the bond be updated, we have to fulfill that condition, but we don't have to get a new site plan approval in 5 years. Okay.
But, if it's a 5-year review results in the Planning Commission saying, well, we think the financial security should be X, and the applicant says, well, we're not posting that, well, then I guess the next thing they get is a cease and desist order because their use isn't approved anymore.
That's not any different than if the buffer was clear-cut and we didn't satisfy that condition.
The county still has a seat at that proverbial table.
If you include in the motion or the ultimate approval of the decommissioning plan as a condition of site plan approval, that it be reviewed periodically, and you could say it could be reviewed in the same time frame that the Public Service Commission is obliged, that the applicant is obliged to seek review and approval from the Public Service Commission. which is every 5 years.
So thank you. You segued nicely into my second question, which is, instead of voting and putting conditions on resolutions and things, what would it not be just as efficient, if possibly not more so, to simply table this motion and allow the two parties to continue their conversations? And you're going to come back anyway. Why would that not be in our best interest?
It could be. My guess is what you're going to hear in response to that is if they, that camera, when you start talking, it twists towards you.
Getting your good side.
I'm sure what you're going to hear is that they would prefer to get what is essentially a conditioned site plan approval because their investors are requiring it, number one. Number two, they might be able to then move confidently forward in the next 30 days with the final tweaks to whatever engineering plans final tweaks to engineering plans to completely satisfy DPW and so on. That'd be my guess as to what you're going to hear. Did I guess correctly?
Good guess.
So, President's nodding behind your head, Counselor.
We're under significant timing constraints because there are certain timeframes for Delmarva Power to construct and interconnect its substation. There are certain timeframes for approval under the CPCN. And moving to the next step to finalize construction drawings, procure landscape material, we really would like to have the site plan approval. If the only issue that is open is this bond, we're comfortable coming back in June and resolving that with a conditional approval, but we'd like to have a vote today.
So you're comfortable expecting to come back before this body within the next meeting, 30 days, essentially?
We will be back next month.
To iron out this bonding conversation, debate, if you will, that we've been...
We will have ironed it out before, and we'll be back June 10th to report it.
They're going to cave to our every request.
I don't think that's the same as ironing it out, but we're close.
It's up for interpretation, Counselor. That's why we have two sides, right?
I think we can figure something out.
Any other questions from the commission?
Thank you for the explanation.
May I say this? I appreciate the willingness of the applicant to discuss this further. It would have been preferable if it had been done before we got here today, inasmuch as I did contact by email the attorney who represented the applicant before the Public Service Commission. But that's fine. We're where we want to be.
No, and I think that this debate, right, shouldn't necessarily reflect negatively on the applicant in this case. This is a problem that's outside of this particular project. Yeah. And again, I would reiterate Councilor's comments that that's appreciated on this side of the table.
Thank you.
Otherwise, they've done everything that they could possibly have been asked to do, I think. Do you agree with that, Rob?
I concur completely. These two gentlemen are the face of what I've dealt with most. The engineer has changed, but they've always been very responsive to all asks that we've suggested. I have no complaints.
The counties are not left with much in this process, thanks to the perennial solar kits. And thanks to the incredible political pressure that is being placed on the approval and installation of these projects, frankly, wherever the applicant wishes to put them in the counties. You know, we have some authority, and it's in this site plan context that I believe we should assert that authority reasonably and consistent with our codes.
One last question. I think it's straightforward, or at least I hope so, in that it's a question of construction order of operations. I don't know who in your party is best responsible to this, but we have had other projects come before us that have just suggested or staged, they stabilize the field prior to going on site. Or the opposite occurs, they construct the solar arrays and then they sort of seed and stabilize underneath that. Can you please explain what this project's order of operations with respect to stabilizing the site? Meaning do you plant the meadow first, or do you plant the solar panels first?
So let me address one point that's, I think, most important. The Board of Appeals condition requires that the buffer be planted first, before we mobilize. So on an array-by-array basis, the buffer will go in before everything else, and then I'll let Nick respond to the erosion sediment control sequence.
Yeah, and I think as far as them going out, I think earlier you guys mentioned that they may have already planted row crop. They probably didn't this year, knowing that the project may happen. Stabilizing it, there'll be both temporary and permanent stabilization. So the final meadow mix, I would say, is the permanent condition. So you're not planting all the wildflowers and stuff that during construction would be run over. So what you do instead is you actually put down a temporary stabilization that's a different seed mix. We work with Soil Conservation District, the NRCS, and they're good species that then allow the meadow to take over more easily. So during construction, there'll be disturbed areas, but kind of a temporary seed that gets put down across the site. Once construction's done, permanent seeding gets put back in. So you would see, like, once the panels are all installed, there will be tractors going down through between each of them, putting in the final.
Temporarily stabilized, but not with the final meadow mix.
Correct,
As
yeah.
proposed in your plan. So there's
So temporary, it's ryegrasses and other
Yeah.
ground cover that would grow up during construction, and then afterwards, a permanent mix gets put down that eventually it kind of takes over everything that's put down during construction.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
We've just heard it, every variation of the half dozen we've heard tweaks it, and I just was curious as to what your construction operation was and the approach, because I don't think there is a standardized way, because, right, topography varies, soil conditions vary, so, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, now may I have a resolution?
Madam Chair, may I make a motion that it is resolved that the Planning Commission, regarding the request by Bluegrass Solar LLC for major site plan, proposing to construct a utility solar project with an array and inverter area of approximately 266.04 acres within a 510.25 acre site boundary, as more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP 19-08-0034, hereby finds the major site plan is consistent with the goals and objectives of Queen Anne's County zoning and subdivision regulations and the 2010 comprehensive plan, and hereby grants major site plan approvals subject to the following conditions. 1, all conditions of the existing Board of Appeals conditional use approval are applicable. 2, if by the time of construction the panels proposed have changed from that provided on the plans, updated information must be submitted. 3, applicant must notify planning and zoning when ownership of the solar array changes. Where is, I'm losing my place here. Thank you. 4, provide the finalized forest conservation plan and protection documents. 5, prior to final site plan signatures, provide an automatically renewable decommissioning bond that is enforceable by the county. 6, prior to final site plan signature, provide an automatically renewable landscape surety and maintenance agreement. 7, any other required legal documents must be approved, signed, and recorded. 8, any remaining edits and/or documents required by a reviewing agency, the Department of Public Works, or Planning and Zoning be reviewed and approved. 9, irrigation systems must be installed and operational within 30 days of landscaping installation on an array-by-array basis. And 10, the applicant works with staff to reach a tentative resolution with regard to bond and surety issues for the decommissioning process and mitigation, and that they return to the Planning Commission for its approval or rejection of the proposed resolution.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it.
Thank you for your time.
Rob, thank you very much. That was.
Thank you.
I know that you built your muscles up just dealing with the plans.
Just carrying it out in there.
Although it was worth it, they told me I looked like a Navy SEAL with the big water. So I'll take what I can get.
Brian, when is the 60 days up on that other case?
Thank you, everyone.
We're getting close.
I think, well,
I don't remember when.
it was mid.
Oh, that's all.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I hope I can call them up and say, have you got the check, and then we won't even need it. All right.
Have a good one, man.
All right. Okay. Nice to see you.
Okay, we have another major site plan. Are they coming in?
Yeah.
Good morning. Bob, you want to introduce this one?
Not really, you did such a good job last time. Unless I have to talk. I have both of them on. What's that one? I don't have the colored one, so if you want it up there, we can probably find you a, you want to, let's see if we find it. I'll hold it up. Don't just stand there like Vanna White.
Yeah. Too much coffee.
Big one got put in that closet. What do you got there? You got the keep it clean.
Gotta model the way, James.
The wear them still? What?
My kids do.
Oh, no one else? Yeah.
Hey, I
think as long as you're Not while you're talking, while you're sitting.
Well, then did they say no more 6 feet apart? Like now, foot apart, 12 inches? Isn't it Saturday?
It changes daily.
Hard to keep up.
Different size feet.
Ready?
All right, next up is major site plan 2012-0070. This is Postal Road LLC. Today, the applicant is proposing to combine 6 lots in order to construct 2 30-unit residential apartment buildings with an 880 square foot utility building. So from this map, you can see we are in Chester, off of Postal Road, you probably may have guessed. These are the 6 parcels involved with this project. They total just over 3 acres. These parcels are zoned town center, and they all reside within the Chester-Stevensville growth area. All 6 parcels are also within the Postal Road, Cox Neck Road Survey District for Maryland Historical Trust. 4 of these, highlighted in orange, are listed as structures that contribute to the historic district itself. It's important to note that these designations do not prohibit redevelopment or demolition. It just involves a little bit of history to be taken, a Tier 1 survey, and if required, a Tier 2. In this case, the Tier 2 review has been completed, so photographs have been taken and measurements have been documented of the historic sites, or buildings, rather. So this is existing conditions look. So if you can see my cursor, roughly where the dumpsters are, and the next 4 structures are this site, obviously extending back into the wooded area. And this is looking from the other view, so from this home down to the parking lot here. So this is the site plan. Outlined in red here and here are the 2 apartment structures with a density of 20 units per acre, which was approved by the Planning Commission in October with the concept plan. This property is to be served by public water and sewer. Also approved with the concept plan was a parking reduction from 108 spaces down to 103. Stormwater is provided on site. Each of these blue dots represents a stormwater feature. There's a small amount of woodland to be cleared. If you can see the wood line here, the cleared woods is in this back area here. There are non-tidal wetlands and buffers on this site. They are down in this back corner. There is no disturbance proposed to that area. Site amenities are located here next to the wooded area. They include barbecues, pavilions, picnic tables, cornhole boards. This project is required to meet Forest Conservation Act requirements. They are addressed with forest retention of 0.64 acres here, which will be placed in long-term easement. And this area right here is also contributing to their requirements. We asked them to place it here to provide additional screening to the residential lot next door. Just north of that is additional screening not required by the landscape plan placed for screening of the building from the residential use next door. This solid brown line here is a board-on-board fence which will screen the home that sits about right here. And the dashed brown line is a split rail fence just to demarcate the property line so that everybody knows where they are. All the circles and symbols on the site are the required landscaping. So these are pictures of the proposed amenities. Obviously the top right and left are the fences. The permanent cornhole boards are in the middle. Pavilion with picnic tables, barbecue grill and trash receptacles, and a hot coal bin. So this is the architecture proposed by the applicant. And you'll see that these are very similar, if not the same, potentially, as what they have built down at Shamrock Road, which is what you see here. So the two really look very similar. And with that, I'll answer any questions or turn it over to the applicant to introduce themselves and description.
Good morning. My name is Tom Davis, DMS and Associates, and Mr. Jim DiDonato here. We're requesting conditional final site plan approval for this project. I'm sorry.
Forgot Victoria over there, sorry.
I remember.
Sorry, she should be sitting here.
I didn't know you were even here.
Sorry, Vic, I didn't even see you.
Tom, take your microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We're requesting conditional final site plan approval. We did, as Rob had indicated, receive conceptual plan approval last year. We've been working to address the engineering, sewer, water design, stormwater, gone through several stack comment reviews, and basically we're to the point where we're requesting conditional approval so that we can go ahead and move forward with securing sureties, final execution of any legal documents, and so on and so forth. So unless you have any specific comments about the site design or whatever, or architecture for Jim, I just answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Davis, good morning. Thank you. I thought I remember in my review reading about MPDUs.
Yes.
I can't find that data now. Can you speak to that?
Vicky's the expert on MPDU, so I'll let her roll with that.
There's a requirement for 10% of the units to be moderately priced units, so there'll be 6 moderately priced units in the buildings.
Throughout the 2 buildings?
Yeah.
Got it.
And typically, what we did with the housing department was, originally, we would make them fixed, but the housing department has actually found it more useful to keep them floating, so that as needs change with their tenants who are on the NPDU list, sometimes it's a 1-bedroom, sometimes there's 2-bedroom needs, so they've allowed us to make it flexible so that at all times there are 6, but as the need might change.
So apartment 3 is not always the MPD
Correct.
unit? Got it.
Yeah, it was originally, for instance, at our old center, but we found that, they would call us and tell us if they had more or less different needs, and we would adjust. So it actually worked out better.
Sounds like a nice compromise for everybody. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, logistically, it makes, you try to put 3 in each building, but then like if somebody's moving out because they do turn over, then maybe that apartment's not ready, and then there's one available. And because there's when we build the units, there's no differentiating between one or the other. Like, we don't build one nicer than the NPDU, so they just kind of float around. So sometimes it might be, we try not to put them, we probably try not to put them all in one building, because they don't turn over that. But every year, if you qualify for an NPDU, you have to requalify. So for example, if you meet the threshold for, like the economic threshold for income, but then you get a better job or something, then you may not, then they have to. And a lot of times what happens is, let's say that individual no longer can meet the NPDU, but they still want to stay there. Well, we let them stay, but they have to pay the market rate, and then we open up another one, so that it just didn't make sense to move somebody out of one into another.
You don't get hamstrung by something that's meant to help, right?
Yeah, so, but there'll be 6, right?
Thanks for explaining that. That's been something that we have talked about over the years, and Jim and I have spoken personally about it, and I think you guys have done a great job and shown the county that this program is something that the community is in need of, obviously. So appreciate it greatly.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? No, public comment? Nope. Well, this is an easy one.
Just want to string it out a little
After the
longer,
last one,
Do you have a decommissioning plan?
May I have a,
Oh, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
a suggested resolution? Anyone?
Madam Chair, may I make a motion that be it resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Postal Road LLC for major site plan approval for redevelopment of 6 parcels along Postal and Cox Neck Road to include 2 30-unit residential apartment buildings and a utility building, and as more particularly described in Department of Planning and Zoning File SP number 20-10-0070, hereby finds the major site plan is consistent with the goals and objectives of the Queen Anne's County zoning and subdivision regulations, the 2010 comprehensive plan, and the 2007 Chester-Stevensville Community Plan, and hereby grants major site plan approval subject to the following conditions. 1, any remaining edits and/or documents required by a reviewing agency, the Department of Public Works or Planning and Zoning, be reviewed and approved. 2, the architecture, lighting, signage, and overall design must substantially reflect the documents provided. 3, the administrative subdivision must be approved and recorded prior to final site plan signature. 4, the applicant shall provide information to indicate the apartment development rental rates comply with the county standards for workforce, age-restricted or other moderately priced housing. 5, any required legal documents must be approved, signed, and recorded. 6, any required bonds, sureties, review, and inspection fees must be submitted to the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Zoning as appropriate. And 7, all required signatures must be obtained.
Second.
Second, we have a, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Jim,
Back when you can't stay so long.
my suggestion about walk-in shower.
You'd have to refresh, I remember, but we have to talk about that again.
You don't have
We have a 5-minute break.
any walk-in showers for people that
good.
Okay, so we're back in session. Lauren and Ray Moravec of Wallace Montgomery will lead the commission in a comprehensive plan work session on economic development and tourism chapter.
Great. Thank you so much for having us before you again. As you mentioned, my name is Lauren Good with Wallace Montgomery, and Ray Moravec is joining us virtually. So if you have any comments for him or any questions, he'll be addressing you from the interwebs this morning. So as you mentioned, this discussion is related to the Economic Development and Tourism chapter. But before we get into that, I wanted to provide some brief updates on some of what's been going on since the last time we met with the commission. So with this slide, we're highlighting some of the recent outreach efforts that have been undertaken, including 2 special topic workshops, which include the Kent Narrows Community Plan and then the overall community plan. So these happened within the last month or so. We've had 1 additional technical committee meeting and had some interviews with various staff and community stakeholders, sent a number of email updates, and made a number of updates to the website. I do want to let everyone know that all of the videos from the 5 visioning sessions and the 7 special topic workshops are all now available on the project website. So if anybody wants to go back and take another look at them, they're there along with the summary write-ups and comments and whatnot that were discussed during those meetings. We do have 1 special topic workshop remaining, so once that one happens, we'll add all those pieces to the website. Okay. So we've had over 230 people subscribe to our regular updates, and then we have over another 300 people that, whether they are county staff or organizations within the county, we've added them to provide information out to the public, and then several of those are also sending that information on to their various groups. So the Chamber of Commerce, the watershed groups, we're seeing a lot of that. There's sharing of social media posts, so information about the project is getting out to a number of people beyond those that have come to us to sign up specifically. Just a note on project outreach, I know that this is an interesting time with the pandemic occurring and limited in-person meetings. We have had a pretty good group of people attending all of the visioning and workshop sessions. Some of them are familiar faces that are coming to all of them, so that's great to see that interest. Some people are attending the meetings based on their level of interest in the particular topic. But we've found, just looking at some of the past efforts that we've undertaken where there have been in-person meetings, we are seeing more people provide comments, whether those are verbal comments during the meetings or in the chat boxes, or we've also been having people submit comments or questions through the project website or follow up via email. So we've been extremely pleased with both the amount of input and the type and breadth of input that we are getting. So I think that's great, and we'll continue to encourage that, and anybody that wants to continue providing those comments, we are looking for them to do so. On that note, we did want to also just briefly touch on the second memo that we provided to the Planning Commission that was really trying to stress the importance of this process and the comments and feedback that we are receiving. And while the input that we're receiving from the public is very informative and we are incorporating that, we are also looking to the Planning Commission, staff, for your comments. This comprehensive plan is your plan, so we are developing it to to be the plan that you would like to see. So if you have comments on any of the chapters that were previously discussed, the one we're discussing today, or the ones we will be discussing over the next 2 months or so, we really encourage that feedback, and the sooner the better, so that once we get to the point where we are trying to incorporate all of the various comments that we've heard on the drafts and develop that the next revision to incorporate everything into a full draft plan. We're not at the 11th hour incorporating substantive comments. So if you do have any of those now, we'd really like to hear them. The sooner the better. We've had several additional questions of the week, and we are displaying the ones that are related to the economic development chapter that we are discussing this morning. So this one was just asking about the attributes that make a commercial development appealing, and those responses that were most prevalent in the responses were the type and variety of businesses, and then a tie between the next level of the businesses being locally owned, having parking available, and then access both to the sites and within the site for bicyclists and pedestrians. There's also been a lot of conversation in some of the visioning sessions and the workshops about the 301 corridor in particular, and thoughts about its preservation with either land or agricultural preservation, or looking to this area to be one where economic development is promoted more. So with this question that was posed, it was, should it be preserved as that either scenic byway or promoting agricultural development, or the reverse? And while there were 25 people that responded to this, over half of them agreed that it should be preserved. So again, these questions aren't meant to really sway any decision-making within the plan one way or another, but just to provide an additional level of information for you to consider as we move through this process. Going back to the comprehensive plan survey that was done several months ago, these are really the similar questions that had multiple response options. This was what is the importance to quality of life of economic development, or those various components. So you can see with the results here that over half the people thought that job opportunities were important to quality of life, which of course that makes sense. Again, shopping convenience, and then sort of going down that list, affordable housing and transportation options. And when you look at it between the very important and the important, these topics were all ones that were strongly considered to be important to the county's quality of life. Then when you look at the importance to future development, again, we're showing very strong feelings of these being very important between job creation and the variety of businesses, incorporating smart technology and the transportation network. So all of these are items that the people that responded to the survey think really need to be considered and incorporated into the planning document.
Ms. Good, before you go on to the next, sorry, wasn't quick enough. Can you expand upon what smart technology means in that right-hand slide, or right-hand chart?
I will do my best. Caveat here, this survey was conducted prior to our involvement in the planning process, but in general, smart technology would incorporate things like broadband or high-speed internet, and the ways that it can expand businesses and the different things that occur. So whether that is
But that's an infrastructure component of a new development.
It's a piece of that,
Okay.
or even these days, being able to participate virtually on calls, whereas in the past there had to be a face-to-face meeting. Sometimes that's not convenient, so even having that component incorporated makes things easier. Some businesses need that higher level of technology to conduct their business. Think data centers or things like that, or even when you think about some of the manufacturing or warehousing and distribution type plants, just the mechanization of those and how that can bring additional value to what that business is doing, letting them work faster and reach out to more customers. So I think it does fall into a variety of different areas, but I think that probably that infrastructure backbone is a critical piece to it.
Thank you.
Was it including perhaps the access for families to have internet connections from their homes, or there are different parts that this pandemic has shown that children don't have access to the internet to do distance education. Is that part of what we would define as smart, or is this more for business focus?
It's certainly part of how I would define it. I think that it not only is beneficial to the businesses themselves, but even starting out with children in preschool and kindergarten, just building that foundational knowledge to use it to connect to education, or doctors, being able to teleconference with your doctor on things. There's such a wide range of areas where where smart technology comes into play.
Okay.
Lauren, if I could add to that real quick remotely, is the big part of that, there is the larger, as you're seeing even with the COVID environment, the teleworking communities, others, how job situations are occurring. So having that accessibility and the ability for people to work remotely and other things all plays into that on how businesses are locating, size of businesses, et cetera, as part of that effort.
Thanks, Ray. It's definitely an important component to everything, and I don't know whether it's a good thing that we can use what's happening in the pandemic as an example, but if there is I guess not so bad side to it, is that these technologies are expanding and at a faster rate than we probably would have seen without it. Although it's a high price to pay, but well, that will. Just move along here. One of the additional questions just asked about what the public felt the role for various county officials should be, whether they should encourage, discourage, or remain neutral on a variety of issues. And as you can see, the far and away the greatest comment here was to encourage sufficient road capacity. So, you're all very aware of the traffic concerns and whatnot. So that would, be something that is addressed there. Followed, pretty closely behind by the farmland preservation component. Retail development, tourism. So it looks like a lot of these are things that people think that officials should be encouraging. Versus discouraging these various items. And then the last specific question was really about how development over this last period has impacted these different topic areas. This is where we're seeing some more negative comments, where sort of the reverse of the last question, traffic volume is being negatively impacted by development. That's definitely the biggest one there. There's a lot more of the either little change or feeling pretty neutral about some other items. while some of the positives are that there is greater access to healthcare providers, facilities, and opportunities. So, varying views depending on what particular aspect you are looking at here.
Lauren, can I ask a question? So it says this is survey results on economic development. And you've got role for Queen Anne's County officials on the left, which all, with the exception of the residential housing, pertain to economic development. But on the right, local impacts of development, do we know, was there any clarification for those taking the survey? Here in Queen Anne's County, when the local impacts of development, I would say most people's minds go to additional housing. Was it made clear that this is local impacts of economic development? Or is this, I took this survey and I believe this is exactly how it appeared on the screen, but are these people reacting to the question as it pertains to economic development and not just residential development?
So these 4 questions were actually a bit broader. They weren't specifically addressing economic development, but we, for each of these, as we have with the past presentations, we've pulled out some of the particular items that relate to the topic that we are discussing. So this question was more asking about just generally what impacts have there been, whether positive or negative, based on development that's occurred in the last, since the last plan was developed. I don't recall the exact wording of that question, and I left my copy of the questionnaire in the car, unfortunately. But a copy of the results of the full survey are available on the project website, along with the numerous write-in comments on many of the questions. So while this is one component of that response, there are also several pages of written-in comments, either giving more information about the choice that the respondent made, or just in general, just providing some additional information. Excuse me. So as I mentioned, in late April, we had one of our special topic workshops, and this one focused on the Kent Narrows community plan component, and was primarily intended to be a discussion with the Kent Narrows Development Foundation's board, and to get information back on their thoughts, priorities, and requested revisions to the plan itself. So a lot of the comments that we heard during that workshop were that, just generally the sense of the Kent Narrows and its character were a great asset, along with everything that goes with that. Some of the greatest needs were that there were properties that were underutilized, traffic, and needs for a community center or something like that. And then the next 2 components here just really pinpoint some of the preferences that were identified, whether that's a shuttle service to help people navigate within the Kent Narrows, or from there to adjacent areas, additional investment within the community, environmental protections, funding that is generated by taxes that are obtained from within the area, and then comments that some of the zoning may be outdated and should be revisited, repurposing some of the old outlets, and maintaining the plan, this particular community plan, as its own standalone document, rather than incorporating it directly as an element in the county comprehensive plan. This is as you can see, a very brief summary of what was a hour-and-a-half long workshop and discussion. And again, more detailed information was provided not only in your packets, but available on the project website. This I guess, particular topic or section is a little different than the other community plans. Obviously, there is a board in place that is charged with various things, including implementation of various items. And we wanted to incorporate that feedback to not only help give you all the plan and components that you want to see, but also to provide a usable, updated component for the board and the Kent Narrows in general to utilize moving forward. So not only did we have this discussion, but several conversations with various stakeholders. We received information from board members, summaries of some general requested revisions to this chapter. So that's we are taking a broad look at this in particular while updating this section. So one comment I just want to make at this point is that when the project was originally started, the intent was to take the 3 existing community plans and incorporate them into the overall county comprehensive plan, so it was one document versus having 4 separate or standalone components. We have heard preferences, particularly from the board, that they are more interested in maintaining that community plan as its own standalone document. So again, you all on this commission are charged with actually developing the comprehensive plan. So we are looking to you for guidance on that particular point. Regardless of the direction that takes, it's our intent that the Kent Narrows component will continue to provide the information that is needed to fulfill the board's objectives, and just updating it and making it more current. So really, I know that's sort of a last minute question, but if you ponder that as we move through, and then we can revisit it just to get your initial thoughts on that piece of it. Yes.
So I have a question. So the community plans, you have the Kent Narrows, you have Graysonville, Chester, and what's the other?
There's Kent Narrows, Graysonville is a standalone, and then Chester Stevensville is a combined.
Chester Stevensville, okay. And each one of them has their own community plan component, or their own community plan that pertains to a specifically designated geographical area?
Correct.
Okay. So one of the choices in the new updated comprehensive plan is to put them in the document, but with the understanding that these are sort of standalone documents or standalone plans within the comprehensive plan. Is that correct?
Yes, and one of the reasons is that one, for anybody that is implementing the plan, or even just trying to read it, all of the information is in one place, rather than potentially needing to reference multiple plans. But also, there's a lot of information in the various chapters, some of which you've already seen, that gives that broader overview of the existing conditions and some more generalized community concerns. And then the community plans can, rather than duplicating some of that information, can look more specifically at what the concerns or issues may be for those particular areas. So right now, obviously, this binder that I have right here is a printed copy of the county's the countywide comprehensive plan as well as the 3 community plans. That's a rather large binder there. So a lot of that is information that is sort of duplicated or can be referenced to the generalized area, and making it just a little bit more user-friendly overall. That being said, you know, we certainly can pull out and create or update the Kent Narrows plan to incorporate some of the information that's already in some of the other chapters, and then add in that specific geographical component. It's really, you know, we want to do what will work best for you all and the county in developing the plan itself.
So 2 questions. One, the Kent Narrows Development Foundation, can you share with us the rationale behind their position on being a standalone document outside of the comprehensive plan? And my second question is, if that plan wants to be separate, should we treat the other 2 community plans, should all the community plans be treated in the same fashion, one way or another, in your opinion?
I will try to address the first question, and my understanding is that the board of the Kent Narrows Development Foundation utilizes this document very regularly when they are going through their business, or when they are looking to promote different economic development opportunities and things like that. And they like the fact that there's, they can hold up that one plan, and everything that they need is right there. Again, so that they're not having to search in multiple locations for the information that they're looking for to do the duties that they're assigned. That community is again a little different than either Graysonville or Chester-Stevensville, because there is the special taxing district. There are different requirements because of that. And there's a board that, again, is in place to, on the one hand.
That's covered in the individual, right?
Sorry?
That's covered in their individual plan.
Yes.
Okay, so to get to a quick answer on the second part, wouldn't it just make sense to have a overall plan for each one that's their individual plan, and do the same thing for all parties? No?
But there was an effort to roll all the sub-area plans into this comp plan.
What's that? I didn't hear you.
Amy can probably address that.
Yes, that was our initial intention, to roll all of the 3 community plans into the comprehensive plan. One of the main reasons in doing so is it was staff's hope that through this review that this board would be interested in streamlining the many zoning districts that are in place as a result of having multiple community plans.
Rezoning them? Is that what you're saying?
Ultimately. So in order to streamline our zoning code, which is the next step, and our zoning maps, this exercise would need to acknowledge that the granular level of detail in those community plans has established a need for a very complex zoning code and a lot of different zoning districts that might only cover very few properties. So the hope is that during this exercise that all of the unincorporated areas would fall under this comprehensive planning exercise, not negating the strategies and initiatives that came to fruition out of the last planning exercise. It's not our interest to negate that planning exercise, but to incorporate it. And in the places where some of those initiatives are duplicative, then they apply to all of the areas that share similar characteristics, and ultimately what we hope will be similar zoning districts, whether they be commercial, mixed use, residential, agricultural. What is unique about the Kent Narrows is they do have a special taxing district. They do have a more specific charge that does not exist in any of the other unincorporated areas. Since the board has been very forthright in expressing their desired outcome, we don't see a need to completely disrupt that board's initiative and to ask them to retool the way they do business. It doesn't really give staff a lot of heartburn to look at that request differently. There aren't as many zoning districts in, and this is another one of the reasons, there just aren't as many zoning districts in the Kent Narrows, specifically because of the taxing district. The taxing district is connected to the WVC district, and that kind of is the overarching and predominant district, and there's no intention to change that. That district is codified in several spots in the county's code, and it's not, as this is an update, it was not our intention to just redo all of, to that degree, all of the many aspects of the Queen Anne's Code outside of Chapter 18, which is ultimately where we're going with the comp plan update in one regard for this board, is to help us to better update the land use, which is coming next. Okay?
So as I mentioned, I know this is something probably want to ponder for a little bit or continue thinking about that. So if you have any initial thoughts on that, or we can come back to it later on in the meeting just to see what your preferences are, how you want us to move forward with that component. Either way is fine with us. We can address it, but just want to have that acknowledgement from the Planning Commission that the preference is one option over the other. And then somewhat related, the next special topic workshop that we held focused actually on community plans more generally, and each of the community planning areas had a component of this workshop. So here are some of the major comments that came out. Again, for the Chester-Stevensville area, focusing on environmental protections and the acknowledgement of changes that are already being seen with climate change, and then taking a look at some of the information from the work that was done leading up to the last round of plans, and how that might still apply now. Graysonville, focusing on connectivity and parks, looking for ways to reestablish the character and sense of place that was once there that may have been lost in the over the years, and then focusing on really infill development of commercial businesses, things of that nature, and then again with Kent Narrows, strengthen connectivity to adjacent neighborhoods and communities. Specific comment about height restrictions and not wanting to see high-rise level development in this area, and then just taking a look at streetscape design, things of that nature. Are there any questions or additional comments at this point? Okay. All right. So that will move into the discussion, particularly surrounding the Economic Development and Tourism chapter, which drafts you all received. And then after this meeting, we'll be putting this draft on the public website, making it available to others that want to take a look, read through it, and provide some comments. Similar to other chapters, contents include vision, key issues and themes, guiding principles, and legislation. And then here we did pull out related planning documents that are go a little further to inform this chapter. Along with a section on public input. So some of the items that we went over a little earlier during this meeting are again included in the chapter. And then moves on to economic characteristics, which part of that we thought, again, it would be better to pull some of the information that we originally had in the county profile section and move it here so it's in one location. Some discussions on the various industries within the county, economic centers, workforce development, some different tools, techniques, and best management practices, and then strategies and actions to help achieve the goals and visions of this section. As I'm sure you're all aware, there are a number of organizations, programs, and resources related to economic development. And while we were developing this section, we thought, if we include all of these within the chapter, it's just going to increase the length of that chapter, but it's still important information to contain. So we are proposing to pull that information out and include it as an additional appendix, and then doing the same with some of the previous chapters, just so there's sort of that one section that's a resource guide for additional information should people want to dig into any of that information in a little bit more detail. So there, as you can imagine, are a number of different resources that are out there related to economic development and tourism. So this is just a short list of some of those, everywhere from the county's annual financial reports, some studies that have been done by the county and the Economic Development Department and the Economic Development Committee, and some additional workshops or meetings that were held with the EDC to specifically discuss the comp plan in a little bit more detail. Some implications of improved 301. So what does that mean for the county? And an impact analysis that looked at some of the financials from the arts and entertainment districts, the state's comprehensive plan, Reinvest Maryland, and what information can be drawn from that. The Maryland Department of Planning has a large number or a large amount of statistics, reports, and projections on a variety of different areas that were incorporated, as does the state's Department of Commerce. And then there are a number of federal data sources that provide information at the county level, whether those are workforce and performance indicators, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, labor statistics. There's an economic census that takes place, as well as a census of agriculture. So really incorporating that information to provide the most updated statistics and information as background, and then using that to inform the remainder of the chapter. So combining a lot of that background information and our analyses, as well as the broad number of comments that we've heard from the public, whether it was during the visioning sessions or special topic workshops, along with conversations with the technical committee that's comprised of county staff, all the different resources and input that we've heard so far. A number of sort of key issues rose out of that. And that's, highlighted by some of the priority industries and sectors. Some of these are ones that we're all very familiar with, agriculture or the hospitality industry, retail, some of those components that that are already prevalent, and we know they exist and that they are solid industries. But then also, similar to that, some of the more emerging niche markets that complement those, such as additional or expanded types of tourism. So whether this is agritourism, which promotes really what's going on farms, what does it mean to be a farm? What is that day-to-day life like? Or just getting people out to experience that, to ecotourism, which is taking an advantage of the natural environment. There's a variety of areas where some of those niche markets are coming into play, and then also. Again, thinking about going back to the smart technology conversation, with telecommuting and the internet and things like that, how is that impacting economic development, and what might that mean for the future of the workforce, the future of industries or sectors in the county? We don't obviously have a crystal ball, but we are again seeing some of these items be accelerated and coming into play, whether that is going to impact the workforce and having more people work from home, so there's fewer people commuting to work or at different times. Are there are some of the farms using those that more high-speed internet to modify some of their practices? I mean, there's a very wide range of implications that could have, and how might the county prepare to address those in the future? And that also sort of dovetails with the business retention and expansion. It's of course important it's important to attract new sectors, attract new businesses, and keep that economic development growing. But we can't forget the businesses that are already in place, and how important they are to the community, and what are their needs? Do they want to expand? What would it take for them to expand? Can we help put those resources in place? And what are they looking for to do that? And again, that directly sort of leads into that workforce component. So the people that are involved in these. Why might people be moving from the county to other places? How can we help to attract them to the county? How can we keep young adults in the county and not moving outside? So as we've heard in previous sessions, affordable housing is one of those big ticket items. People can't find housing that is affordable to them, especially at some of the more entry-level, first-time job areas. How can we help in that area? How can we promote some different educational opportunities? Thinking back, several years when the VOTEC education was, I think, more prevalent. There seemed to be a period where there was a lot of thought that you needed to go to a four-year college to be successful, and that's just not the case. So how do we promote some of those more technical jobs? Can we work with the schools or Chesapeake College or some of those others to help promote those? And what are the businesses and industries that are currently here? What are they looking for? What needs do they have? What skills do they wish their employees had? And how can we connect all of them? So that was a lot, but those items are all really interconnected, as I'm sure you you know and can tell. So before we move on, just wanted to sort of get any feedback, questions, or comments that you might have about that piece of it.
So I'm just going to, I have been working with the Economic Development Commission, the Economic Development Director, the Tourism Director. We've spent hours and hours and hours looking at, examining, and talking about this, and I wanted to thank them all, you know, the volunteers on the commission. Some of the overlying themes, because there's just so much and too much to cover here, and economic development and tourism, to me, is one of the bigger driving forces of this comp plan. It's you know, sort of, is that we avoid being too restrictive and provide flexibility in this chapter. There are so many changes that have taken place over the 10 years. Even if you take out the pandemic, there has been a lot of changes in the county and in some of the businesses that are here, and that we allow some flexibility to that. The 2010 plan in the economic development and tourism has a recurring theme of that, you know, they're responsible for creating a balance between the need for job creation and expansion of a tax base to support community residents and provide services while protecting our natural environment. Nobody involved in this, economic development or otherwise, is against protecting the natural environment, but I think that having that as a heavy overlying theme is maybe out of place here. Something more upbeat in promoting Queen Anne's County as a place to live, as a place to work, and as a place to have your business would be to promote the natural beauty in our surroundings and, you know, instill a promotion and respect of the natural beauty of the county rather than shouldering the responsibility of protecting the environment on, you know, developing businesses, et cetera. I also, again, so many changes, particularly with the pandemic, that may have, you know, caused some more remote working. The importance of, I'm going to include broadband as an infrastructure, you know, need, definitely. Workforce housing, workforce development between, you know, our school systems and Chesapeake College, are just some of the recurring themes that came out of all of our discussions. And one thing, and I wrote it down here just so I don't forget, that the 301 corridor and the scenic byway issue had some really informed discussion from some of our members in the ag community and from the North County, is that a cautionary in that there may be unforeseen consequences of a designation as a scenic byway, because there may be, that may have some implications to a farm, an agricultural entity that wants to set up an agritourism or agribusiness or brewery. So there may be unforeseen consequences. So I'm not offering an opinion on that at this time, but I just want to make sure that we understand what that designation means to anyone along that corridor who may want to do it. I have pages and pages of notes that I'm not going to torture you all with, but I just wanted to present to you what these themes are. And then the strongest one was, let us be more flexible in how, you know, we're going to retain and attract businesses and allow those businesses to grow. And I would say broadband is probably the way that we're going to do that and grow in a smart and environmentally sensitive way. So.
Very good. Anyone else have comments?
Sharon, I'll send you all these pages of notes.
Okay.
Under workforce development question, has there been any looking at, we've got several communities now that are 55 and over. Has there been any question or interest in looking at how we tap into the retired or semi-retired people that are moving into those areas as a part of complementing our workforce development?
From our perspective, no, but I think that's actually a really good idea, because I think that there probably are opportunities, particularly at the business park. There's a wealth of manufacturing companies there that the physical requirements are not that great. I mean, I know that we took a tour. There were anybody with any kind of disability or challenge is, in working in parts assembly and so forth. So I think it's a great idea.
I mean, they've
Are you
got skill
talking
sets.
for work or are you talking for
I'm
teaching?
just talking about skill sets. These people,
But for teaching or for actual doing the work?
well, they could actually be workers or teaching, either way. But they've got skill sets that retirement's only good for a certain period of time, and then you get bored. And then you're trying to find something else to do.
Most of my friends that are retired disagree with you.
And I play
I'm
golf
not
with
retired,
them. But I would suggest that there are other people that are not in that, good fortune or fortunate situation, that there are opportunities for their skills to be redeployed, and they don't want to fight the bridge. They don't want to, go to the Western Shore. They want to stay here where they are. And, they're in these 55 and over, their spouse may have passed, and they're looking for something to do because they're lonely. So I'm just suggesting, as a point of
Good idea.
consideration, that we look at where that might tap into a benefit as we look at the economic development and such. And maybe, people that want to be guides for the tourism. They may be folks that have great interest in that, or, whatever it might be.
Yeah, well, I can bring that up in my purview anyways. Thank you.
That's definitely a great comment, and I actually don't think that that's something that we've heard from any of our input sessions. So that's certainly something that we can expand on and try to incorporate that. Great. Any other questions, comments right now? Nope. Okay. And then. Again, so we've touched on some of the infrastructure needs. So really, a lot of what we're hearing is that telecommunications part. So obviously, broadband. Not only how can we help to serve the underserved areas of the community, but making the existing telecommunication structure more consistent, so that one day you've got fantastic service, and the next day you can't, you've got like half of a bar, those types of things. Just so making that consistent. I know that there is the Broadband Advisory Committee for the county. They've been doing work. There have been several grants that have been applied for to expand broadband access. There are some things going on at the federal level that may influence that. So, what is the best way to get that infrastructure component out there? But then moving beyond the telecommunications piece, more traditional infrastructure, the roadway network. How can we help to efficiently get people from point A to point B? How can we, help to not have people commuting over an hour to get to their places of work? Things like that. And then what are different water and sewer needs, and there's just a variety of infrastructure components that go into it, and these are all when companies are looking to locate somewhere, these are things that they're considering. If location A has all of these things and location B doesn't. All other things being equal, that makes it an easier decision for companies to make. So how can we get the county to that part where it's competitive in these different areas? Similarly, there's definitely differences due to geography. So the needs for economic development and tourism in the Kent Narrows, in the Chester-Stevensville area, are much different than they would be in North County. There's different priorities. You're most likely going to see more of the hospitality and tourism component in the Kent Narrows, Kent Island area. But like we've mentioned, there are opportunities to grow various markets, the agritourism component or different things. So what are the differences that are needed? How do the towns play into it, where there are those higher population centers or some of the different infrastructure components already in place, the various business parks or the larger shopping centers, things like that. So really encouraging what's in place and promoting those, promoting what is what's applicable and what makes sense. It wouldn't obviously wouldn't make sense to put a technology park in the middle of a very agricultural area because the infrastructure is not there, and most likely it would be taking up farmland that is very important to society in general. So there's just those very different things to think about. What makes sense in one place just doesn't make sense in another, and just recognizing that there's a very broad spectrum of what is of what's going on in the county. And then we did touch a little bit the commercial growth and land and agricultural preservation, and there are some unintended consequences if you go one way or another, and what does that really mean? What does that look like? So just very important things to consider. So I guess at this point, if there are other comments or questions on the draft or about any of those other issues, definitely something that we would like to hear from you at this point.
Another comment, one of the comments I would make is that you really haven't had any more participation than you had in the beginning, right? I mean, you're only getting 25, 30 people.
We're getting a range in that area, and there is a core group that there's a core group of people that we're seeing at every event, but then there are at every one of the workshops or sessions that we're having, we are seeing new people participate. So while that core group remains pretty consistent, we are seeing that additional feedback and getting new information and new ideas on that other component. If that makes sense. So if
But you're just not getting much response.
What would be the total number of people you feel you've had response from?
At any one shop, what was it, 40?
Are you talking about participation like in the Zoom meeting or in the, because I would wonder that, and then people who are writing in comments and stuff, because some of these meetings are held in the middle of the day, and it's a 1.5 hour or so.
I still have a concern that there's
commitment.
A lot of people don't have access to these meetings, myself included. And the number we're looking at is a very small percentage of our county residents.
Very small. I mean, it's not even
It's
half
right.
a percent.
Is there any consideration to, as we move closer, hopefully, to less restrictive meeting, requirements per the state and so forth, that a couple of general meetings, I mean, you're not going to be able to go back and duplicate all of these individual meetings, but that of findings or draft findings to address Tom's, that you can inform the public in a way that they can get there before this is finalized, because I think that's important.
I just want to outline a couple of things. When these comp plan updates happen, generally there are probably fewer of the public meetings than we've had. And generally in-person meetings haven't solicited the number of participants that we've seen. And another aspect of the Zoom meetings that have really provided for greater attendance is we've gotten more depth of comment. Generally at these public meetings, what happens is a presentation is given, there are some exercises where we try to gather general information through putting up charts and getting, the dots exercise, which is a very common planning exercise to visually see priorities. But what we're seeing in the community meetings, the visioning workshops, has been really a level of people engaging verbally, but people also giving comments to us and to Lauren and her team, where normally those conversations happen offline and in corners in the room, and we don't hear any of it. Or if there are some elected officials in the room or planning commission members in the room, they get some additional information, but it doesn't become a part of the record. So I just want to continue to reiterate that the level of participation that we are getting is very good, relatively speaking, to other comp plan updates. And I know it's different, and we would have much rather to have had these meetings in person. But I do feel that we're getting substantive information. Now, there's another layer that Lauren and her team has put together, and that's the technical committee layer. Those, not that the public their input isn't valuable and welcome at all levels, but those technical committee meetings are very well attended, and they're precise in terms of the input that we need. Now, what I will say is there have been, like, in most technical meetings, around 30 participants in each one. And what we're looking for is that kind of the backbone of each section where we need the statistics, like for the water resources element. We need Alan Quimby, who's our Public Works Director, to give us the numbers so that we know in a quantifiable way what we're dealing with. When we met with economic development, we really wanted to hear their focus on which strategies were working and which strategies need updating. So we're really looking for very pointed input, and we're getting it, and we're allowing the opportunity to collect that information. When we are going to hold the land use and rural communities aspect, we're really going to need the agricultural community to voice their opinions on the draft, because all of these meetings are happening, and then we come to you, and these workshops are where, and it hasn't happened, and it should be happening, but it's not happening, where members who have participated, say, in the visioning sessions, and I know people work, but in the visioning sessions, which are public, focused on public input, have happened in the evenings. And our technical meetings have happened during the day because we're asking people to give us their input, mainly about their job expertise. So it's kind of a work-related meeting. But not in all cases, because we have solicited input from a lot of boards, too, who are volunteer boards. But at these meetings, too, is sort of where a lot of those issues that come up that need to be reconciled are laid out there for the whole public to hear. And these meetings are recorded, and there's an opportunity for people who can't participate in real time to go back and look at these meetings and say, I wonder what happened with this comment that I made. Especially, we know that there is one of our bigger issues to discuss is this 301 corridor idea about a scenic byway designation versus opening up that corridor to some commercial uses. That's going to be a big conversation, and that's where the economic development comments that we receive and the comments we receive from the ag community need to come together. And that's sort of your role, is to allow that opportunity to happen. So these workshops are really where some of that deep level of conversation needs to happen. And that's why Lauren put that memo together to you to say, look, the deep level of conversation, which will be happening with economic development today, and especially with the agricultural and land use component, which is coming, this is where some of those issues really should be hashed out, because when this draft comes in its final format, it's going out for 60-day review, and we have a deadline that the commissioners are expecting us to meet. So we've heard your input about community engagement, and of course, Lauren and her team have done their best in a world that we have no control over, the pandemic. They are constantly talking to us about what the county's policies are about public meetings. I think as of this morning, there may be some dialogues happening because the governor has just lifted some more restrictions to start on Saturday. And I know that Lauren and Ray have looked for opportunities to be present in some physical setting where they can gain more input. But, I can assure you it's not for a lack of trying and providing opportunities, but I also just want to reiterate that the response has been positive, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the community about having felt that they've had an opportunity and that they've been heard. So I'm not taking that criticism lightly at all, but I also want you to know that there's a broader picture.
I have to disagree with you, really. I mean, I know what the pandemic has done, and it's upset the world. However, I don't feel we've reached the public at all, especially when you're talking about the agriculture community, 301 development. What you're getting is the individuals who want the development up there and those who are diehard against it. We're not talking to the average person out there and what Queen Anne's County wants. So you're getting the ones who are passionate about it, but we're not finding out what the real community wants up there, what's important to the people. And I know it's hard to do. I don't have an answer for you. But I feel sad that we can't achieve that before we make a decision on it.
Don't forget, there are going to be public hearings. So.
Public hearings? Real public hearings?
Public hearings, yes. There will be, there's a public hearing that is required at the commissioner level. Are we having one at the planning commission level, or is it just the county commissioner level?
If they're not open to the public, where we've been, we
No.
still be a true public meeting.
The
Because I'll
final-
tell you, a lot of people don't have access to the internet.
I
or
understand.
To broadband to do this.
Especially in the agricultural.
Yes.
This board is going to see the final draft, and public comments are accepted at all of our meetings and encouraged. The county commissioners will be holding a public hearing, and we need comments then as well.
And I don't
And
believe.
how much does public comment really change anything, if you think about it? I mean, when we have our public comment here, we listen to the public comment, then we take our vote. So how much does it really count?
Counts in that you've heard a public
Yeah.
comment, and if it's valid and there's something that you can do about it legally within the parameters of your guidelines. I mean, you're beholden to follow the law. And if a comment is brought to your attention where there's a provision that may or may not be followed, then you would take appropriate action. And so the same would be so for this plan. If there's a great inconsistency through this update and is brought to the attention of this board or the county commissioners, then that affords this board the opportunity to address it.
I mean, I wasn't offering my initial comment as a criticism. I get all of the restrictions that have been in place, but I think I'm speaking for myself, and I get a sense I might be speaking for most, if maybe not all of the commissioners here, is that we're going to be making decisions about this comp plan knowing that large sectors of this county have not been able to participate. Even when I participate in my home, I've had to move 3 different places in my own home to have trying to get an uninterrupted experience. And then I actually ended up having to phone in to a few of the meetings because I couldn't keep the internet connectivity. And I understand Tom's point. I think that with all of the brilliant minds in this room, we could try to come up with a way to give what certainly is one of the largest sectors here is our agricultural community, our watermen, just to give folks who are out at 4 a.m. and in at 6 p.m. and then dealing with other aspects of their life. I feel like I would feel more comfortable if we could try to find some way to have some engagement with them. And it's not a criticism because everybody's been working on a huge project here, a huge undertaking under some really restrictive, restrictive atmosphere.
When will there be a draft plan? And how long is it for review? And how does that review happen?
Sure. So our intent with these workshops is to provide 1 to 2 chapters of a session where we're hoping to get your feedback on this initial draft, as well as putting them out for the public to provide input. And just an aside, before all of the special topic workshops or visioning workshops, those presentations are posted online, and in the press releases or the information that we've put out, Ms. Murdoch's office has offered to print out hard copies for anybody that is interested in seeing those, so they're available ahead of time. And then we're doing the same for these sessions as well. We're putting for these, we're linking to the recordings that QACTV is developing, and then for the specific workshops, those videos and comments are all placed online. So if there are people that wanted to go back and look at those things either before or ahead of time, they are available, and we can coordinate some of those efforts to, if internet is problematic, to make them available. But to your point specifically, we are gathering feedback on these initial drafts from a variety of different sources, and we are working both on the remaining chapters, but then also incorporating that feedback into the chapters that you've already seen. And we're hoping that the issues and comments that we're hearing will be addressed in that next, in the revisions that you see next. We don't have a specific date at this point for when, we don't have a Tuesday in this month they'll be to you. We're still working out some of those issues as we get a little closer to that public review, the official public review period. But at that point, our intent is to have addressed the substantive issues, comments, questions, things of the nature that you brought up. How do we incorporate the 55 and older community into economic development? Those are substantive comments that we're trying to address now versus at a later point when we're coming up against that adoption period. So that's why it's a really critical time. If you have comments, you mentioned that you have pages of comments. We would love to see them. We want to see them and to be able to incorporate that information so that this works for you. And
I think you probably have, but this kind of just for the benefit of my fellow commission members here who may not.
Trying to further answer your question, once there's a final draft, it then gets sent out to the state clearinghouse. They have 60 days to look at the draft plan and make comments, and then it comes back after that 60-day period with the state clearinghouse. They send it out to various agencies and state planning.
Neighboring counties.
They have to justify their existence, so they make some comments.
23
then
counties
it
have the
comes
same
back.
time frame?
Yes,
Pardon me?
yes.
And then it comes back to you all. You gotta have a public hearing. And then you make a recommendation to the county commissioners. County commissioners can't touch it until you all say, this is what we want, because it's your document, not theirs. And then they have a public hearing, and they can make changes. If they make changes of any particular substance, it comes back here, because it's your document, not theirs. And then ultimately, they adopt it.
Do we have to go back to the state and everything if they make
Depends on
changes?
the level of changes that happen between the planning commission submission of it to the clearinghouse and what the commissioners have to do. Sometimes if there's major or substantive changes, you decide whether it goes back to the clearinghouse or not.
I've never seen anything go back to
No,
through clearinghouse.
no, typically
but
not. There's a major change.
We could always be the first.
Could be the first.
Typically not.
I think we were looking at a July timeframe to get a final draft completed. So that was, I think, what was?
That was my original question.
Yeah.
Our schedule is that we're working with all this and through these to get that full, complete draft. Really working at the end of July so it gets in front of everybody. The intent was everything would be out for review so that in that October timeframe is when we were looking to have the public hearing. So we're trying to get that, July draft, it's out there for review, comment, starting to go through that process so that hopefully by October, we're having that formal public hearing.
And we've identified those initial timeframes, but we haven't been too heavily promoting them yet, just knowing how things might change and wanting to, as we get a little bit closer, solidify dates that would work with the Planning Commission schedule, the County Commissioner schedules, all of those. So once we have a more definitive time frame and agreement on those, that's definitely something that we are going to put before you so that you're aware. Put that out to the public, press releases, that information will be very, it will be out so that people know when different items are scheduled.
The only, this is my last comment on this matter, and that is, I promise.
Sure.
That perception is reality. And I'm just asking for your help because I do think that there can be a growing perception problem that outreach has been insufficient. And I want to just reiterate in my experience that generally when we have any plan updates, we do mainly hear from people who have vested interests on one extreme or another. It's very uncommon for the general population to be engaged in this exciting process.
Well, it's a time for change.
Well, that's true. That's true. And a part of the times changing is this electronic outlet that we do have,
If we had the electronics, it
if
would
we
be
had them,
reasonable,
I know.
right.
But, I mean, that is the way our culture is evolving. But I just want to say that there can be a perception that can take over that voices have not been heard. And I know that we're never going to hear every voice. But just if we could have your help, unless you completely disagree, that the perception that we don't have sufficient public input is the reality. But I would argue that that isn't the complete reality, that this is the nature of a comprehensive plan review, that we do hear from people who are already engaged and they have interests on one side or another, and they are going to be vocal anyway, whether it's in person or online, and they make time to do that. And we can always do better and reach more people. But I would be disappointed if at the end of this process, where it has been a challenging time, that momentum grows, that Lauren and her team has not been proactive in outreach.
I'm not going to say they haven't tried, but my question is, what efforts, you mentioned putting out online, but what efforts have we made to reach the people that don't live online?
Don't have a line.
Have we done
Maybe-
public?
Is there a way that we could have it published in the newspaper?
Well,
like in
even
the-
more so putting up signs in a grocery store or whatever, school, because how many people read papers today? Not a lot of them either.
I read it once a week.
And I will note that we have had a few press releases that included the dates, times of the various meetings, that the resources could be obtained, hard copies could be obtained. Those have been placed in the newspaper. We've been working with Ms. Mulaski to get that information out, and we are planning to have another one relatively soon. That since we're nearing. Well, we've gotten to a little closer to the end of the process, just sort of where we are now and what the remaining steps are and additional opportunities for input. So we are definitely trying. We have expanded the number of people that we're reaching, but certainly we are taking your comments to heart, and we can definitely provide those flyers that get put up. If you all have other suggestions on how we can reach out, how we can reach
Just feel we
different
need to make an
communities.
effort to reach those people that aren't on the computer constantly. To let them know that it is. I mean, truly, a lot of them probably won't respond, but I think there's some that, if they knew, would.
Okay, any other comments from the commission? Do you have further today?
Just the next slide, which is upcoming dates. So we've got our last special topic workshop coming up at the beginning of June, which again is looking at land use, priority preservation. That's the agricultural preservation piece, and then we have 3 more of these types of workshops scheduled with the Planning Commission, and then we get into more of the pulling the pieces together for the draft, which again we'll have those dates for you.
June 24th, were you planning a whole day?
Nope.
Thank goodness.
We were thinking, something similar to this, where we'd be providing some of that information, you'd have the drafts, and then we'd be discussing any comments or questions that you have.
Okay. All right, any questions? How about public comment? Thank you very much, Lawrence.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Anything from staff? Round out the day, everybody have a nice weekend and a nice Memorial Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't be here June 24th, but I'll send you an email.